budget is a tool that helps us to be transparent and accountable. Scripture reminds us that having a plan is wise, and we are all called to be good stewards of the resources we have available. In the Gospel of St. Luke, we read these words: "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it?" Good sense. Nevertheless, budget setting is not easy. And so in the deliberations of this meeting, let us pray that God will give to us the grace to listen and listen to one another. Guide us, O Lord, by a spirit of fairness, to consider all who will be affected by the decisions made in this place for the people of Oldham. Amen. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Budget Full Council meeting. May I remind members and members of the public that the meeting will be streamed live on a podcast from the Council website and broadcast live on Oldham Community Radio 99.7 FM. The Council has a commitment to conduct its full council businesses in an environment that is welcoming, secure and safe for members, employees and visitors. It is important that meetings are conducted in a safe and fair manner. All persons present at meetings should be treated with courtesy and respect. This includes members of the public, elected members, employees and visitors. Behaviours, language or action that impacts on public safety, causes destruction and/or adjournment to the course of business at meetings are not acceptable. Members of the public are asked, therefore, to note that the public meeting protocol, which is also available on the Council's website, and elected members are reminded to note the elected members protocol and the members' code of conduct, which was signed upon taking office, which provides detail of expected principles of behaviour. Does Council agree to the suspension of Council Procedure Rules 14, Rules of Debate, to enable the Councillor Jabbar to exceed the time limit for his contribution in moving the administration budget to 15 minutes 30 seconds, if required, and the seconder, Councillor Chadderton, 6 minutes. The movers of the main opposition groups in moving the opposition budget a time total of 7 minutes 30 seconds if required, with a right of reply of 6 minutes. All other speakers will be limited to 4 minutes. I call on Councillor Chadderton to move, Councillor Sykes to second, and Councillor Sheldon to support this.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Support, Madam Mayor.
Is there any dissent? May I also remind members of the public that the budget meeting is a one-item agenda specifically to agree the budget 2023 to 24. We now move on to the absolute agenda, and item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillors Cosgrove, Holbin and Kay Pythian. Councillor 2.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I'm here. I don't know what's happened there.
Oh, welcome. Item 2 on the agenda is communications. Members would be aware of the tragic earthquake that has affected Turkey and Syria, those lives lost and of the damage caused.
I also have sad news that former councillor Mary Curran has passed away, and I would like to offer condolences to her family on behalf of full council. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, on the issue of the tragic earthquake, I don't think anybody could be failed to be moved by those images that have been on our TV and still are, and the real job of work now starts. So I think you're very right to do this, and we can reflect on that later. What I wanted to do was briefly rise to just say a few words about Mary Curran, who was a former mayoress and Chadderton councillor. She was supported very much by her husband John, who one might describe as a bit more of a colourful character than Marie, but there was never any question about who were in charge. And she was very hard-working and a committed councillor herself. Marie was clearly had a desire to serve our communities and a desire to leave them in a better place than she found them. That's something that Marie and John shared with all of us, regardless of our political differences. I think it would be true to say Marie was not a friend of mine, and I'm sure she would say the same about me. But we had respect for each other, and when she spoke, people listened. We had several spats over the years, and she was a really forceful speaker on education, which was one of her real passions. And she certainly took no prisoners if she thought it was in the best interests of our children's education. I send thoughts and condolences on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group to Marie's loved ones, her family and her friends, and they're in our thoughts as we reflect on Marie's service to Oldham Borough this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Quigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I briefly met Mary probably early on when I was first starting, and I was taken round to her house by Jack Hume, and needless to say, as soon as you walked through the front door, she'd give you her opinion and you knew where you stood. She was definitely a champion for Chadderton, and you knew what she meant, and she said what she meant, and you heard it once, you didn't hear it twice, you were told 3 times, and that's what it was. Colleagues of mine who are no longer on the council, who are still around and knew Marie, just wanted to pass on their condolences to the family as well. She will be sadly missed, and on behalf of the Conservative group, I would like to offer my condolences to her family as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I worked with Mary on a number of committees, and certainly she was an extremely powerful councillor, very articulate, very caring as well. And although she seemed as though she had a hard outer core, inside she really was considerate to people. She worked extremely hard for her constituents, and she was an excellent councillor, and she supported her husband John extremely well. And I think, like Howard said, I think there was no doubt he wore the trousers at some stages anyway. But our condolences from the Labour group go out to her family, and we have great respect for what she did for this council and for the people of Chadderton. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other speakers? Thank you. Can I ask Council to hold a minute's silence, please? Thank you, everybody. Item agenda 3, which is declarations of interest. Are there any interest members need to declare? A form will also be circulated around the chamber. No? Move on to item 4, which is the budget for 23 to 24. Can I remind members that regulations are being implemented requiring recorded votes on specific decisions at the budget meeting? I will inform you when a recorded vote is required. Does Council note the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 13th of February 2023 as circulated? Is there any dissent? Thank you. Item 4A, I call on Councillor Chadderton to move and Councillor Jabbar to second the housing revenue account estimates for 2023-24 to 2027-28. Councillor Chadderton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'll be very brief. As I said at Budget Cabinet a few weeks ago, this Labour administration has committed to helping our residents with the cost of living crisis. We displayed that most overtly with our We Can Help programme, but also in ensuring that our residents living in council-owned social housing don't see sky-high rent increases this coming year. We recognise the impact that an 11% rent increase would have on tenants and what that will bring. Therefore, Oldham's projections for the 23-24 budget have been set assuming rental increases are just 5%, which is less than half of what it would be if we were to follow the maximum uplift. And can I also thank Councillor Fithian as my Deputy Cabinet Member for housing and regeneration for the work that he's done on this over the past few months and for pushing ahead the lowest rent increase that the HRA could afford. Move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jabbar.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree to the recommendations as circulated? Thank you. We move on to item 4B. I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Chadderton to second the Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2023-24. Councillor Jabbar.
Moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree to the recommendations as circulated? Thank you. Move on to item 4C. I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Chadderton to second the Council Tax Reduction Scheme 2023-24 with an amendment to page 6 of the report or page 90 on your agenda pack as circulated. Councillor Jabbar.
Moved, Madam Mayor.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Does any member wish to speak? Thank you. Does Council agree the recommendations are circulated? Thank you. Move on to item 4D. I call on Councillor Jabbar to move and Councillor Chadderton to second the Revenue Budget 2023-24 and Capital Programme 2023-24. And we've got two amendments on this one. Councillor Jabbar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a privilege and an honour, Madam Mayor, to stand here this evening to deliver the Council budget, although it's a very challenging time. I can present a balanced budget for 23-24 and a clear financial strategy for 24-25 and future years. However, we have to be mindful of the context that we're operating in. We are working to transform the borough so that Oldham thrives and prospers. whilst at the same time providing support for Oldhamers who are struggling to make ends meet because of the cost of living crisis. The Council is supporting Oldhamers through £3 million of investment, of which £1.8 million is included in the 23-24 budget. We have worked hard to prepare a balanced budget for 23-24 that has meant making some very difficult choices. We have used our best endeavours and our understanding of current and future requirement of the Council, having regard to cost of living crisis and national economic situation. Let's look at the key issues. Firstly, I would like to focus on the issue that we have to deal with. You may recall this time last year, we approved the budget for 22-23, and the forecast for budget reduction required for 23-24 was 16.7 million. A challenge, but nevertheless achievable. However, shortly after approving that budget, things began to change and continue to get worse. Both international and national events had significant impact, the extent of which could not have been foreseen. This has led to record inflation, pay increases, massive energy cost increases. At the same time, demand for our services continued to increase, especially in adult and children's services, which is partly due to COVID-19 legacy. We have responded to this by providing significant investment in our budget for next year for both services. You will also recall that specific investment in children's services, £14.7 million, was approved at the December Cabinet meeting. During 22-23, financial position, as reported to Cabinet through our monitoring report, highlighted the cost and pressures were increasing. This, of course, had a knock-on effect on 23-24, meant that budget pressures were rising, mostly due to issues beyond directly our control. Government was asked to help. Action was taken. A change of Prime Minister, 7 weeks of chaos followed. Instead of providing leadership to the country and support for the economy, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng almost trashed the economy. The Bank of England had to act to steady this situation. The financial position for Oldham and the country looked bleak at that time. Another change at number 10 and number 11, with the new Chancellor in post, the initial view was that public sector funding would have to be cut to steady the ship. However, some common sense prevailed, and when the Chancellor issued the autumn statement, it was clear there would be some increased funding for local government rather than a cut. But it was also clear that some of the funding would be expected to be raised from increase in council tax up to 5%. Despite the promised increase in funding, it still left us with a lot to do to produce a balanced budget without cutting vital services that we know Oldhamers value. We provided an updated forecast based on best estimate and pressures and likely grants that we were going to get at the Cabinet meeting on 12th of December 2022. In the meantime, we were working on our budget reduction proposal with the aim to minimise the impact on frontline services. It wasn't until we received the provisional local government finance settlement on 19th December that we understood the government's funding for the council. This then enabled our budget strategy to be finalised. The detailed budget proposal are set out before you this evening. In order to identify savings to plug the gap, we reviewed all areas of expenditure. The aim was to look at efficiencies and better ways of working rather than specific costs to frontline services. A minimal level of job losses was also key to the approach. The budget proposals have been prepared to support these aims. As you will see from the proposals, there is an impact of only 7 FTEs, and all of those positions are vacant. In total, there are £16.3 million of new budget proposals that go some way to address the budget gap for 23-24 and a further £7.7 million for 24-25. If we could have avoided an increase in council tax, then we would have done that. But as I've already mentioned, the government expects us to increase council tax by up to 5%. Our proposal initially was 1.99 and then increased by 2% for adult social care is still below the maximum level. Many authorities have increased their council tax by the maximum, including most in GM, and our increase is the joint lowest together with Bolton and Stockport in Greater Manchester. We are using some reserves to balance the budget, and the total amount that will be used for next year is 11.6 million. A thorough review of the reserves and balances have taken place, and I am able to advise the Council that overall level of reserves remains still healthy, and the budget that we have produced is robust. The Council remains financially resilient, and we are in good position moving forward. However, the future remains uncertain. What happens beyond 2025-26 is questionable. The reason for that is the damage that tourists have done to the economy means that it's likely that funding for local government will be reduced, so that we have to prepare for this now. Our budget also sets indicative saving targets to 2027-28, but much of that will depend on direction from a future government. And let's not forget the general election. Maybe there will be a change in government, and that will bring some hope to all of us. However, I have talked about the ambition and vision for Oldham. Nothing demonstrates our commitment to this more than the capital programme, which we are also considering here tonight. Over the period to 27-28, there is a capital investment of £325 million, financed by a combination of capital grants and our own resources. This is essential to the future development of the borough and the achievement of our ambition. Through our Creating a Better Place programme, we will deliver a new spindle facility with new market, new shops, combined with this council office accommodation, freeing existing council office sites for new housing and development, which together with New Jubilee Park will transform the town centre. We want to use our resources to attract private sector investment to support thriving local economies and create jobs and opportunities. But the investment is not just in the town centre, it's throughout the borough, including Royton, Broadway Green, Hollingwood, Salmon Fields, and also housing developments such as South Link and Durker. Linked to this, a key part of our plan for the future is a response to climate change. We take this responsibility extremely seriously. Our Green New Deal is a well-developed strategy supporting our approach to carbon neutrality. The recent announcement of £20 million award for the Green Innovation Technology Network through the Levelling Up initiative will not only support the Jubilee Park, but also development of a green shoot centre, which will support environmental technology startup businesses and learning centre as part of the existing Northern Route initiative, which is now moving from drawing board to delivery. Through our decarbonisation programme, we have secured a grant funding for Oldham Leisure Centre, Alexander Park Depot, the Spindles, and we have identified further 10 key assets to prioritise for decarbonisation works. Feasibility study on the proposed town centre mine water district heating network continues, and we are also investigating options to reduce the street lighting carbon emissions. In addition, I'm very pleased that at the January Cabinet, we approved investment in Wrigley Head Solar Farm, which is very close to me, if anybody hasn't spotted it. A small but very important project, Madam Mayor. We're doing a lot as a council. We accept there is still a lot to be done, but we're clear about our ambition and we will deliver them. In conclusion, I want to say that there may be financial challenges, but it's not all doom and gloom. Our capital strategy gives us a platform to build a better Oldham and to be at the forefront of the green agenda and make Oldham a place that thrives. Our revenue budget is sound. It's based on providing services that our residents value. Our plans for the future are clear and deliverable, and I therefore commend this budget to you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Duban. Councillor Chatterton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I begin by thanking Councillor Jabbar and our Director of Finance, Anne Myers, the huge amount of effort the pair of them have gone into in bringing a balanced budget tonight. And I'm sure everybody in the chamber will join in me in passing our thanks to Anne in what will be a final budget for Oldham as she retires later in the year. Anne has been an absolutely fantastic servant to Oldham Council and to Oldham people over the years, and she'll be sorely missed within the organisation. Now, like Councillor Jabbar said, there is a huge gap and a quite glum economic outlook for the country, but this Labour administration has been ambitious for our town, ambitious for our future, and ambitious for our residents. Tonight's budget aligns itself with the priorities that I set out for Oldham when I became leader last May. Firstly, it continues funding for our hugely successful We Can Help campaign, meaning that residents who are struggling with the cost of living crisis are most able to access support they need and that they deserve. I'm immensely proud of our We Can Help programme. It remains one of the most ambitious cost of living responses in the country. We've given hundreds of thousands of pounds already to Oldhamers that need it. I'm hugely proud of the work that we've done, how we've supported organisations such as Action Together, and how we've partnered with Citizens Advice Oldham to set up weekly sessions in every district so people can get the help that they need in their own neighbourhoods. Now, as I've said repeatedly since I became mayor, children and young people should be the golden thread that runs through this organisation and this town. This budget puts children and young people at the front and centre. This budget outlines a £15 million investment into Oldham's young people, including those that look after them, such as our fantastic foster carers, who have seen their allowances rise by over 14%. Every child in Oldham deserves to be given the very best start in life and the opportunity to fulfil their potential, and this budget goes some way in ensuring that. We know that our families love our parks and our green spaces, and we should all be proud of how great our parks are. And this Labour administration is committed to building a brand new park right here in the town centre. We're also committed to creating the biggest urban country park in the UK at Northern Routes. And we also know, because they've told us many times, that people in Oldham want us to have a thriving town centre, which brings me on to my third priority. Right now, work is underway at the Egyptian Rooms, the old library, at Spindles, and plans are being developed for a new theatre. Of course, as I've said this week, we're working with the Coliseum to try and ensure it's their home going forward. But this isn't just about shiny new buildings. It's about building a better Oldham. It's about creating jobs and apprenticeships for Oldhamers. It's about building a town centre where people want to be, where people want to live, work and socialise. With our plans, I'm confident we can do that we can deliver 2,000 new homes in the town centre, 1,000 new jobs and at least 100 new apprenticeships. Now, Abdul Jabbar has already touched on it briefly, but much will be made tonight in the Chamber and wider in the coming days about the planned 3.99 council tax rise. And the truth is, as councillors, none of us ever want to rise council tax by any margin. Councillor Jabbar and Councillor Anne Vines might disagree, but the reality is local government finance is really, really boring. It's not a conversation that residents like to engage with us in a particularly deep manner. They don't like to discuss the intricacies of it. But I'd much rather we did have an obvious conversation with the people of Oldham about the realities of where we find ourselves. The Tory government expects us and every other council in this country to raise council tax by 4.99%. It's something that most authorities across Greater Manchester and across the country will be doing either this week or last week. In an ideal world, local government and public services in general will be properly funded, but sadly, this isn't an ideal world. Choices made by governments in Westminster, whether it be the disastrous mini-budget that caused mortgage bills for Oldhamers to go up by up to £500 a month, or the failure to fix social care, impact the choices we have to make locally. Every year, this Labour administration has had to salami slice more and more out of our base budget while demand for our services skyrockets. As a result, having to do more with less money and with less people. We've got thousands of dedicated staff working for the council, most of them Oldham residents, who work incredibly hard to make this borough the best place it can be. And the truth is, it is hard, and it is right that we demonstrate how much we value our staff. This administration remains committed to paying the living wage, and this year it means that our social care workers will get paid £10.90 an hour compared to £9.50 they currently get on the national living wage. These are tangible examples of how this Labour Council is putting money back into people's pockets. Another huge example of this is our We Can Help campaign. Tonight, the Tories try to complain that this budget is a simple process. They'll claim that they'll be helping Oldhamers with the cost of living crisis by capping council tax rise at 2%. But given they have such an uneasy relationship with the truth, it's quite likely that they'll say they're not increasing council tax at all. But effectively, the message will be that they can cap council tax, and they'll do this by scrapping We Can Help. Now, firstly, to the proposed council tax issue. I'm sure Oldhamers are pleased to know that they needn't worry about rising energy, petrol, food and mortgages, because the Oldham Conservatives will be saving them 46p a week in a Band A property, 54p in a Band B, 61 in a Band C and 69p in a Band D. Now, I often think that the Oldham Conservative group live in alternative reality, and suggestions like this tonight only reinforce that. Oldhamers are struggling with the cost of living crisis, removing all support that this council is providing and simply saying council tax bills aren't going up by as much as they could be is frankly insulting. Since we've launched We Can Help, we've received calls from 7,000 residents. We've had 14,000 residents that come through Access Oldham, and hundreds of thousands of pounds have gone into their pockets. Scrapping it would be a huge mistake.
At the time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, moving extension, yeah. Oh, you're fine, okay. As I said earlier, there's two amendments. So I call on Councillor C. Gloucester to move and Councillor Sykes to second the amendment to the budget as circulated and detailed in the Council's summons. Councillor Gloucester.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to propose the Liberal Democrat Group's amendment to the administration's budget. Firstly, I'd like to thank Andy Cooper from the Finance Directorate for his invaluable help in preparing this amendment, and also record my sincere thanks to both our Section 151 officer, Anne Ryans, and Mark Stenson, who is the Assistant Director of Finance, for their invaluable advice and patience over the last 5 years, who have actually taught me a lot about local government finance and even tried their hardest to make audit interesting. They leave with the thanks and best wishes of myself and my group. This council is once more forced by Conservative government to make £29 million in savings, with a likelihood of 10 million further savings next year. Almost every week we hear of another council that has issued a Section 114 notice because they are unlikely to be able to meet their legal obligations. Year on year we see cuts to services, many of which are now having to run at almost statutory levels. I take strength in the assurance of our Section 151 officer that we are not likely to be in a position where this council will have a need to issue a Section 114 notice soon. However, central government just does not seem to understand the impact of its decisions on Oldham and towns like ours. Councils like Oldham are yet again forced to burden local people with continued higher council tax bills whilst cutting services. I believe that it's only because Oldham has an excellent financial team that our council taxpayers are still largely unaware of the full extent of the financial pain that we have suffered, but can see with their own eyes now how services are reducing across the borough year on year. So we recognise as a responsible opposition that we must raise the maximum revenue that we can, whilst making significant savings to our overall budget and also recognising the needs of our most vulnerable residents. Accordingly, the Liberal Democrat Group will support the proposal of this administration to increase council tax once more by a further 1.99% plus 2% for adult social care, but do not believe that we are complacent in this approach. We do this with a heavy heart, but need to ensure that we protect our most vulnerable residents because cuts to services will have the biggest impact upon them. The phrase "jam just about managing" is an acronym that now applies to middle earners in this borough, whilst our most vulnerable residents are simply in dire straits and need our support, as in the council, the most, created by the cost of living crisis, fuelled by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, the here today, gone tomorrow Conservative Prime Minister and Chancellor. And accordingly, as the Liberal Democrat group, we are happy to maintain the council tax support scheme at its current level to help those on the lowest incomes to reduce their bills. I now want to turn to our amendment, which is a modest amendment, but it's meaningful. The Liberal Democrat amendment identifies savings of £2.141 million over the next 3 years that can be made without impacting on frontline services, and it identifies innovative ways in which to spend it. Our main aim in this budget amendment is for a safer, cleaner and greener borough, whilst recognising the needs of our most vulnerable residents. Our financial savings focus on core areas on which I will speak about shortly. Many of our proposals have been consistent in recent years because, if not accepted now, will have to be considered in future years, and as our budget report articulates, for example, income targets with regards to inspection within highway services, levels of expenditure within the general training budgets, a variable lighting strategy in relation to street lights, and increasing the council tax premium on long-term empty homes. All our initial ideas. Our aim has been to improve services for our communities, whilst not burdening them with additional costs, and I believe we have achieved this, which my colleagues will expand on later. Through prudent savings, we have found money to invest in our highways, and in particular our long-neglected footways, to strengthen our approach to tackle dog fouling and fly tipping, to reverse this administration's cut to parish council precepts, and to keep more money for local people to invest in their own communities. Address the imbalance for ward councils who fund the Whit Friday band contest, and bring local children who we look after back to Oldham instead of housing them at exorbitant cost outside the borough, and strengthen our offer to youth services so that they're able to provide a better offer across the borough. Of particular importance to me is additional revenue funding for our youth services. And this is not just an idea that we've plucked out of the air, but as a result of meeting with the youth service and asking them how they can improve their provision. For a relatively small sum, they are confident that the offer they can provide across the borough will reap great rewards in relation to engaging with young people, diverting them from antisocial behaviour and having a positive effect upon their health and mental well-being. So if I turn to savings, what I will say is that savings we've identified in some areas are small but meaningful, and some savings large in financial terms but small in the relevant area of the budget. A saving of £50,000 from mileage budgets, a saving of £80,000 from the general training budget, a reduction of £278,000 in the communications and research services, and a saving of £1.113 million by external cost avoidance within children's social care. To put this particular piece into perspective, this would apply to a home for children who are looked after within the borough for only 4 children. We would still have in excess of 50 children placed outside this borough. The real term cost is eye-watering and an issue that needs to be addressed far in excess of our current modest proposals. In 2019, this administration agreed with the Liberal Democrats that a review of car allowances was overdue. So far, nothing has come of this review, so in our budget amendment, we are proposing we end entitlement to a £500 lump sum payment for the 100 or so staff who use their vehicles to make journeys on council business, amounting to 100 miles or less per year.
You had the time, Councillor Gloucester.
Sorry?
Oh, he's got another 30 seconds, has it? Yeah,
I
you're
haven't
another
had
30
an orange
seconds.
light yet.
I've been watching you.
Well, I've nearly finished, but anyway, so... No, it's all right. So, on that basis, I hope you all approve our amendment. Thank you. Oh, it's on now.
Thank you, Councillor Gloucester. Councillor Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm proud to rise to support our proposals, as excellently outlined by my colleague Councillor Gloucester. And these are real priorities for people across our borough. As he said, the intention or the theme is a safer, greener and cleaner Oldham with a fairer futures for our next generation. So, in summary, it's not exclusively funding for 20 is plenty for residential streets. There's both safety reasons for that and quality reasons. What we desperately need is investment, and we've set aside some money for a new Parks and Recreational Spaces Fund. Those spaces are particularly important in our borough. We've got, as Councillor Gloucester said, cash to tackle our crumbling roads, but in particular, the thing that fills my post bag at the moment is our crumbling footways. And with an ageing and more infirm population, we are making people prisoners in their own homes if we don't look after the footways. We need more action on enviro crime and, as my colleagues already said, a new children's social residential care home. Not only makes sense for the children, it makes financial sense as well. So what we talk about is what we call getting the basics right, and what most people talk to me about is that's what they want their council to do, and that's what they expect their council to do. Safer neighbourhoods, 20 mile an hour, more than enough for residential areas. Many other councils have done it. We should do it, and I don't understand why we're dragging our feet. Real action on environment crime, getting to grips. And I have to say, this administration is, despite all the noise, pitiful record on tackling littering, fly tipping and dog fouling offences. Earlier this year it was confirmed that the council only issued 64 littering fines in 2022, down from 194 in 2020, when COVID restrictions were still in place. The council also confirmed that fewer fly tipping fines were handed out, 33 in 2022, down from 50 in 2020. It's an understatement to say this direction of travel is very much in the wrong direction and something needs to be done about it. As I've said earlier, we would establish a much needed designated Parks and Green Spaces Fund, both capital and revenue, because we need to invest back in our spaces. It was such a valuable lifeline during COVID. Social care is one of the greatest challenges that government at all levels must grapple with. We must break our dependency on the private sector by providing care places in our borough run by the council, and we must bring down our agency spend and training, and must retrain top quality care workers here in Oldham. And yes, there's a national crisis in social care and recruitment and retention, and yes, it requires national solutions like a carer's minimum wage. That's why we have called for a new minimum wage for care workers, £2 an hour higher than the current minimum wage, and we urge colleagues across the chamber to get behind that policy, because it would be transformational for caring professions, and we all know they're undervalued and under-incentivised. But what can we do locally? What we can do locally is provide more council-led care facilities. In these Liberal Democrat budget proposals, we would deliver a new children's residential home in Oldham, and that's a start, not a finish, and we need to do more. It makes sense also for our young people, but it also makes financial sense and pays for itself. Properly resourced youth services can act as a lifeline for many, and they provide the first opportunity for early intervention that we know alleviates pressure on other services further down the road. Our plan is to provide funds to improve youth services across the districts in the whole borough. And finally, we will provide more cash to fix our crumbling roads and establish some budget provision to do something about the dreadful state of our pavements. So I commend our proposals to you: a safer, cleaner and greener Oldham. These are the people's priorities, what you, the people of Oldham, has told us you want from the council. Please support the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sykes. Does any member wish to speak on the amendment? Is there any more speakers? Thank you. I call on Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to look in more detail at the proposal around bulky waste and to ask for some clarification about what exactly is being proposed. Cabinet recently agreed a new approach to bulky waste collection, combining the service with our local welfare provision service. The aim is to improve the reuse of furniture and white goods which are in a suitable condition to allow the local welfare provision to help more people to set up home. The new contract will start in April 2023. The Cabinet report said that Bulky Bob's currently does about 6,000 collections a year. The new contract, will continue to offer one free collection to every household receiving an assisted bin collection, which is about 2,000 households across the borough. And I'm not quite sure if the Liberal Democrat proposal is to replace this with an offer to the most vulnerable and infirm, their terms, who also don't have a car, which is potentially fewer people than are helped at present, or whether the Liberal Democrats' proposal is to extend a free offer to everyone who doesn't have access to a car, in addition to the most vulnerable and infirm. There are approximately 90,000 households in Oldham, and about 30% do not have their own car. This would potentially mean 30,000 households qualifying for a free collection, if that's the Liberal Democrats' intention. In their proposal, it says 174 collections a week, which would total, I think, 9,000 a year, which leaves a big shortfall to that potential demand. I'm also not convinced that car ownership is a sensible disqualifying measure. A fridge freezer won't fit in a car, and many small cars will struggle to take bulky items. So it would be helpful if the proposal could confirm what the proposal is, and it would also be helpful if you could be clear about what is meant by vulnerable and infirm, if that's different from people who receive an assisted waste collection, and how many residents you anticipate would therefore be eligible for your proposal. And just to turn to some of the comments that were made by Councillor Sykes, I mean, I'm concerned, as everybody else in this chamber, about the consistent, persistent, antisocial and illegal fly tipping across the borough. And so, for example, one of the things that we decided to do was to treat dump bin bags as fly tipping rather than littering. And the maximum fixed penalty notice for fly tipping is £400 as opposed to £100. This means that the numbers of figures of fly tipping as opposed to littering offences, fines and prosecutions has changed because our policy has changed. So in 2022, the correct figures are that we issued 203 fixed penalty fly tipping notices for fly tipping, and we also carried out 30 prosecutions, and we would have carried out further prosecutions if we'd been able to get them through the courts. So a lot of the issues we have around successful prosecutions is actually getting people through the courts because of court delays. So while I welcome the Liberal Democrats' commitment to a cleaner Oldham, I think that the proposal as set out in their budget will not necessarily achieve what they hope, and I would welcome some clarification about how they think this will work in practice.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Our wonderful youth service has been wasting away for many years since this council has made cuts across all services. Now, people will argue tonight that every single department or service is valuable, but for the young people of this borough, they are missing out on services to support them in gaining confidence, supporting their emotional well-being, and understanding how life can truly change by collaborating with their peers and meeting and working with the youth workers who do a fabulous job. Whether that is engaging with young people on the youth council, Children in Care Council and barrier breakers. Each individual young person's view and concerns are always taken into account, no matter what they say. Now they have limited contact with youth workers and the work that they used to do. It's not like school, it's teaching young people about values for life. Some young people are missing out, and that is why one of the Liberal Democrats' priorities is to increase the revenue budget for the youth service by 50,000. Where the youth service is sadly missed is in districts, and also the detached youth workers, who I must single out by saying that they do a really good job of supporting those young people who need a little bit more guidance about their behaviours and goals, plus many more. District youth work will support the community where certain districts have paid for additional activities for children and young people, and they will enable, provide and promote positive emotional health and well-being. District budgets are being cut again, and we will struggle to support our community groups who provide a form of youth work within our districts and communities. I know you will not agree to this amendment, but hope that you could seriously consider this proposal at some point next year.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Have the Liberal Democrat group considered the impact that further general training budget reductions would have on the ability to recruit and retain highly skilled employees, such as social workers, where we're under massive pressure and struggling to recruit as it is, who want to know that training is available for them in order to progress through the organisation and make a difference to the lives of Oldhamers. Also, for many of the professional service areas, staff are required to complete up to 30 hours per year of continuous professional development in order to maintain their professional accreditations. Surely, my Liberal Democrat colleagues would like this council to attract, maintain and develop the skills and knowledge of its staff and provide opportunities for career progression within the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Kenyon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As much as the people of the borough of Oldham are enthralled to see the two parties fight it out, not to the death of one of them, but seemingly instead to the death of the very town they claim to serve, you'll either be starved to death by the Blue Brigade or managed to an early grave by the Red administration, too in love with clinging to power by any means, rather than doing what's best for the people of the borough. The Lib Dems, meanwhile, have proposed spending items that are well within our control, not overly reliant on winning some beauty parade of grants, not reliant on profiting from a hoped-for property boom. Things that would improve life today, making our town a better place to live today, to make Oldham Borough a safer, cleaner and greener place to be for all of us. To that end, I'd particularly like to point out our plan to introduce 20-mile-an-hour zones across the borough's residential roads, cutting emissions and reducing the risk of serious incidents on our roads. Our proposal for footways, highways and disabled parking investment would make our communities more accessible for everyone. Traffic, speeding and parking shouldn't be political issues. People talk to me about it every single day, asking us all to do more. And I cannot believe that support for this measure in this chamber is limited to the Lib Dems. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Mushtaq.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I think most of us in this chamber probably understand why the Liberal Democrats have made some of the suggestions in their budget proposals. However, given the immense financial pressure local government is under at the moment, difficult choices have to be made, and administration has chosen not to make the choices that you recommended at this time. But I'm glad to see that the Liberal Democrats are on the same planet as the administration when it comes to council tax increases and aren't trying to hoodwink the people of Oldham by acknowledging the reality and supporting the 3.99% rise. And I think that's quite important because I guess that makes you the Orange Brigade and the Red Brigade are realistic about what the government is asking us to do. the income received by the council, part of that is an expectation of a 5% increase in council tax. So when the Conservatives later stand up, just bear that in mind as well. And with regard to the car allowance review, this has been hampered, Chris, by things like COVID and the ongoing issues. However, the review would look very different today, I think you'll agree, given the lockdowns and how that's changed the way we work. We've learned so much from that, and there are continued changes in the way everyone works, I guess. So I think it's apt that that review will be complete by the end of the summer, and no doubt will look very different. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mushtaq. Councillor Ibrahim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I take note from the Liberal Democrats' proposal that the biggest saving area is additional vacancy management factor. I have serious concerns whether this level of saving can be realised without having substantial impact on service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Hussain.
Madam Mayor, I think one of the biggest issues we have in Oldham at the moment is the ability to tell our residents about the fantastic work that goes on in the borough, done by the council and its parties. So I'm very spectacle about the plans in the Liberal Democrat proposal to delete 5.4 posts out of the communications and research team and stop the publication of Oldham Council Working for You. Have the Liberal Democrats given consideration to the impact this would have on the council's ability to communicate with residents effectively? I think at this moment in time, this is the wrong proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Does any other councillor wish to speak on the amendment? Okay. Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you so much. So first, sorry, Madam. The time, Madam Mayor, that I was wasted by the... So, yeah, first of all, Madam Mayor, I'm grateful to the Liberal Democrats for accepting most of our budget proposal, including the council tax increase. I think they are financially responsible. They understand that, and that's why they're supporting it. I think, look, if we had the money, we would do some of the things they're suggesting. The investment in footpath and the investment in youth service, we would do that. You know, I think you make perfectly good argument about it. The problem that we've got is that we've got scarce resources, and you know that. You sat through Cabinet, you sat through ONS, and that's the problem that we've got. I think the biggest problem I have, Madam Mayor, is that they're relying on a massive saving from a vacancy factor, and neither of them, when they spoke, Councillor Gloucester or Councillor Sykes, actually mentioned that. And Councillor Ibrahim picked that up, and it's a real issue. I don't think can deliver that, and therefore some of the investment that you're talking about, I don't think can be delivered, and that's the reason I'm sorry to say that we're not going to be able to support the amendment. I think also, Madam Mayor, that the issue about bringing children who are outside the borough into the borough, as I said in my opening speech, £14.7 million has been invested, and one of the things we are going to do is to look into the whole issue about providing care for our young people. And absolutely, one of the key things will be to see how we can bring back kids who are outside the borough into the borough. It's good for them, but also, as they outlined, it's a massive saving to the council. So that is already part of the review and the investment that we have made to the service. In relation to the communication team, which was picked up by Councillor Sajid Hussain, I think, with all the things that's going on at this moment in time and the issues around making people aware of what's available, particularly support that's available, I think it's absolutely the wrong thing to do, Madam Mayor. And I don't think that's a good proposal. I can accept most of them, but this one I can't. The car allowance, Councillors Mushtaq has mentioned, we are taking a review of all car allowances right across the borough because we need to do that after what's happened with COVID and people are not working all the time in the office, and I can categorically give you the assurance that it will be done. But I have to say, Chris, you know, I've looked into this. I don't think there's a massive saving that you think is there. I don't think it's there. People have essential car allowance because of the nature of the job they have, but they don't claim because all kind of issues is there. But that doesn't mean to say, right, that they just shouldn't have the car allowances, because this is really important to recognize. And finally, Madam Mayor, this issue about, you know, nothing's improved in relation to littering and all that. I just can't accept that at all. I know my colleague, Councillor Roberts, touched on it in her reply. Of course, I'm in for, you know, more prosecution and all that. But Don't Trash Oldham was a massive success, and it has transformed Oldham in all parts of the borough. And we have to acknowledge that. Is there more to be done? Of course, and we will do that. But please don't underestimate the impact Don't Trash Oldham had in the borough. So as I said, Chris, I'm really sorry. Some of the things, if we had the money, we would do it, especially youth service and the footpath that you're talking about. But at this moment in time, Madam Mayor, the administration will be opposing this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jabbar. Does Councillor Goster wish to reply?
Yeah. Right, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I actually think I got it quite easy this year. So I'll just go through a few of the things that have been raised. They won't necessarily be in chronological order to what you've been speaking about, but I'm sure it'll make sense. So let's talk about bulky waste. I've got to say, Councillor Roberts, that having attended both cabinet meetings, number one is where you spoke quite passionately about bulky waste, and the subsequent cabinet meeting, that if you'd have thrown those stats out at us then that would have been quite interesting, but I think it lasted exactly 10 seconds, your comments in relation to bulky waste. But as it happens, that was at cabinet. So, but as it happens, the answer is the number of collections quoted was based on the charge for collection and was for indicative purposes and not necessarily the level of additional collections anticipated. The intention will be to use the 200k to increase capacity with the existing service provider. If progressed, we would need to work with the service and the provider to optimise the investment to assist the targeted recipients. Now, in relation to, whilst I'm just talking to you, Councillor Roberts, you raised this issue about how Councillor Sykes had got these stats wrong in relation to fixed penalties for littering. So I'll challenge Councillor Sykes as to how he could get it so wrong, and the stats that he quoted, he received as part of a freedom of information request to the council. So it's perhaps elsewhere, or perhaps that's the way your stats should have come out, but what he's been told as part of freedom of information and the information that you've got are completely different. If I address the issue of training budgets, now unfortunately in my speech I got cut off without an amber or a red light, I may have to clarify. So the whole purpose of the reduction in training budgets is to basically take away the need for people having to physically go to a training course and to do more online, and certainly more modular training, which is a 21st century thing, which we believe and understand is achievable. As regards the car allowance review, I'd love to say I've not heard that one before, but I've heard it for 5 years. Yeah. So you've really got to understand that it's getting a bit thin, getting told there's going to be a review. And I would actually say, when you say the end of summer, which summer? So, you know, and the one other thing I would say is that, the next hot summer, right, let's hope it's a bit hot this summer. people get this car allowance for the job that they do, or the job that they have. Well, as I say all the time, go into your district office and ask your district coordinators and the other staff in there if they get that car allowance. And I'm telling you, the people that should get it don't get it, and the people that do get it don't need it. So that's why we want it amended. As regards the additional vacancy management factor, what I would point out is our proposals are 0.75 of 1%. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big change. There's always an issue in relation to when we want to cut the communications budget, but we as a group see plenty of waste within that area, and that's why we're looking for reduction. Abdul, I accept what you say about looked after children, or children looked after, as we prefer to call them now. But I think you will agree with me that us as a borough and us as an opposition have identified that it is a massive use of council tax resources and not necessarily beneficial to our young people who are unfortunately have to be in care to be outside the borough, particularly if they're away from their family and friends. So it's a very minor part of what actually needs to be done, our proposals, bearing in mind it would actually only cover 4 children and would leave 50, well more than 50 in excess, still from outside the borough. Now, just in relation to the comments regarding litter, Don't Trash Oldham. Now, my understanding is Don't Trash Oldham's only funded till, thanks for the amber light. So, my understanding is that Don't Trash Oldham is funded only until September 23. That was the last information I received. If that isn't the case, then, you know, I accept that. But my understanding is that after September, that funding has gone. So our proposals are, you know, for 12 months, unlike for 4 months of the next budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well done.
Well done.
I was going to give you another 30 seconds. So we'll now be going to a recorded vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll call out your name, and if you can indicate for, against or abstain on the amendment. Yeah, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Al-Hamdani.
For.
Councillor Ali. Councillor Alias. Councillor Arnott. Councillor Azad. Councillor Ball. Councillor Barnes.
Against.
Councillor Bashforth Marie.
Against.
Councillor Birch.
Against.
Councillor Brownridge. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chatterton.
Against.
Councillor Shahan.
Against.
Councillor Dean. Councillor Gloucester. Chris.
For.
Councillor Gloucester Hazel.
For.
Councillor Goodwin. Councillor Hamlet. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hindle.
Against.
Councillor Hume. Councillor Hussain Aftab. Councillor Hussain Fida.
Against.
Councillor Hussain Sajid.
Against.
Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Islam.
Against.
Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Jabbar. Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Lancaster. Councillor Marland. Councillor McLaren. Councillor McManus. Councillor Moores. Councillor Munro.
Against.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Mushtaq. Councillor Nasheen. Councillor Fithian Clint. Councillor Fithian Kyle. Councillor Quigg. Councillor Rhea.
Against.
Councillor Roberts. Councillor Salamet. Councillor Sharp.
Against.
Councillor Sheldon. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Against.
Councillor Surgeon. Councillor Sykes. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wilkinson.
Again.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Woodvine.
Against.
And Councillor Gary.
Against.
It's lost.
So for is 8, against 48, and abstentions none. So the amendment is lost. As I say, there is 2 amendments. A call on Councillor Woodvine to move and Councillor Lancaster to second the amendment to the budget as circulated and detailed in the Council's summons. Councillor Woodvine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, the best budget has been saved until last. I rise to propose the Conservative Group's alternatives to the administration budget. In the current economic environment, it is becoming more challenging to deliver a balanced budget. However, that is what we have done. The administration's proposals are ineffective in alleviating the cost of living pressures many families are facing, especially from increases in prices associated with the current levels of inflation. Our budget amendments are offering several common sense savings. For the second consecutive year, our Conservative group are proposing a freeze in council tax for general purposes. While we do support spending on adult social care across the borough, we do not support some of the administration's policy priorities. While we have had to take into consideration the international situations such as the Russo-Ukrainian war and the COVID-19 pandemic, and while we understand and appreciate the difficulties so many councils are facing financially, we do believe further economisations could be made in Oldham. The generous local government settlement set out by the UK Government in Westminster has improved the situation very positively. In addition to freezing council tax, thanks to the investment from His Majesty's Government in the form of the Household Support Fund and the Council Tax Support Fund, which have eased the burden for families and individuals experiencing cost of living pressures, we have also been enabled to strengthen the financial resilience of this council by replenishing reserves, by discontinuing the administration's plans to replicate the same service. The main purpose of our proposals is to ensure that the people living in Oldham do not have to pay a penny more as they compete with the pressures of the cost of living situation. The priority of the Conservative group at this time is to keep taxation at the lowest possible level. Our proposals, while making further budget reductions, do not directly impact any of the council's statutory services, and residents should not feel any direct result of them. That has been the priority of this Conservative group. We are retaining resource in statutory services which residents expect to be delivered well, but asking this council to feel the pinch for itself at the Civic Centre and giving residents much needed relief in freezing council tax in these inflationary times. This is achievable through the significant saving proposals we have identified that within 2 years will reduce the council's base budget requirement by over £3 million on an annual basis. This increased financial resilience can also be used to reduce council tax increases in future years. The context of the budget setting process remains as much this year as in previous years impacted by the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, the worst in a century, paired with the impossible international situation such as the Russo-Ukrainian war, which has plunged many of the world's powers into recession and caused significant levels of disruption, which will inevitably continue. These events have manifested in supply shortages in key industries, leading to high prices and rising inflation, not just in the United Kingdom, but in all developed nations. With this in mind, we believe the Council can do more to alleviate the cost of living pressures many families and individuals are facing across the borough of Oldham as the worldwide economy continues to recover. We believe this Council should do more to mitigate the impact of inflation by freezing the level of council tax for general purposes. Difficult decisions do need to be made to deliver a balanced budget, but further savings are required to reduce the future reliance on reserves as set out in the medium-term financial strategy and reduce the need for excessive council tax increases in the future. Our residents will benefit from retaining a higher proportion of their earned income, awarding them greater purchasing power to meet rising household costs. Helping hard-working people with cost of living pressures is our overriding priority, and those people will benefit from the reduced council tax rates that we are proposing for this year and in the future. Our budget seeks to serve all residents, but these proposals, taking into account the tax-paying public who do not see improved output from the council in response to repeatedly handing over more of their hard-earned money. It is important to provide additional support to vulnerable people impacted by the increases in the cost of living, but Labour's budget does not target resources effectively. The UK Government has been conscientious to these needs by providing significant resources to this council that can be directly distributed to residents in the form of the household and council tax support funds. A freeze in general taxation directly benefits a much larger proportion of the borough's population, many of whom would appreciate the assistance at source, rather than the administration's plans to spend monies from all the taxpayers on its redistribution to a smaller amount of people. In summary, we are proposing a range of budget reductions which will reduce spend on non-essential services in order to prioritise helping people deal with the cost of living pressures. This includes reducing a high-cost layer of senior leadership without adversely impacting upon service delivery. Retaining a bloated SLT is not sustainable as residents are struggling to burden increases in council tax every year, and equally, they want to see priority given to good statutory service provision. In addition, we are reducing expensive non-statutory services that cannot be justified under the current financial pressures this council is facing and which are largely perceived as being wasteful. Our residents expect that the majority of their council tax contributions are spent on statutory services. There is further scope to reduce spend on non-statutory services and reprioritise this to other areas due to the ineffective use of funds, and these reductions would have no adverse effects. All resources should be diverted into services that deliver more tangible and noticeable benefits to residents. Madam Mayor, as Conservatives, we want the Council to perform its basic functions well. We want efficiencies to be made in non-statutory staffing and service costs, and we want residents to have some respite in their bills rather than being treated as a source of income to be squeezed. That is why we are proposing to freeze taxation for the second consecutive year, and I commend our alternative budget to full Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodvine. Councillor Lancaster, you have to second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm proud to support my Shadow Cabinet colleague, Councillor Woodvine, in seconding the Conservative Budget Amendment for the 2023-2024 financial year. This amendment proposes a genuine alternative for our borough, and on the part of the Conservative group, represents a promise made and kept to Oldham residents. To restate that promise, our public priority has always been to keep taxation at the lowest possible level, and with that motivation in mind, we have for the second consecutive year produced a balanced budget with the primary proposal of a council tax freeze for general purposes. I acknowledge that this alternative flies directly in the face of established orthodoxy here at the Civic Centre. For more than a decade now, the Labour and Liberal Democrat groups have upheld a cast-iron consensus on council tax, promoting identical proposals and far more often than not hiking the rate. Despite the predictable pronouncements which have been peddled over the last hour, all elected members present do have a choice. Conservatives in Westminster have not, repeat, have not delivered an instruction to the desks of either the leader or the chief executive coercing OMBC to increase council tax. We can increase, or as our group preference would be, freeze council tax, and we will have to defend the positions we take this evening to our residents ahead of these forthcoming local elections in May. Keeping taxation at the lowest possible level has historically been central to the Conservative cause, and will continue to be so. However, the argument for a council tax freeze in the forthcoming financial year is stronger now than perhaps ever before. We all know that the economy is being strained by great inflationary pressures, fuelled by war on the continent and the aftershocks of a global pandemic. When I read the PR pitches of the Labour administration in our local press publications, that their proposals will only cost a certain pound and pence more every week, it strikes me as being naive and narrow-minded. Leaving aside the blasé attitude towards taxpayers, with no regard for the hard work behind every pound and pence earned, higher bills from this council are in addition to higher bills at the supermarkets, at the petrol stations, and from utilities companies. This council does not operate in isolation, and unfortunately costs do add up. We should be looking to offer relief to our residents, not making their lives harder still. Furthermore, the proposed council tax rise is not out of the ordinary, and in fact is sadly more of the same. Compounded with the policies of previous years, Oldham households are now paying several £100s more than they were in even relatively recent times. And I'd be interested to learn of Councillor Chatterton's weekly calculations, considering the full duration of a dozen years of Labour control. As well as being a genuine alternative contrasting the Labour and Liberal Democrat consensus on increasing council tax, this Conservative amendment is undoubtedly bold. I invite members to vote in favour of the amendment because our borough requires boldness. Let us give our residents that much required respite and confirm a council tax freeze. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. For the sake of fairness, I'm just going to advise I've got 7 Labour councillors who wish to speak. Are there any? I've got Councillor Murphy, Councillor Hamlet for the Lib Dems. I've got nobody's indicated from the Conservatives. Is there any Belfast Independents?
Barnes and Quick.
Barnes and Quick. Right, so Councillor Actor, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since the election of the coalition government in 2010, Oldham has had to make cuts of £204 million, partly due to the shortfall in funding from central government and rising budget pressures. Madam Mayor, the Conservative budget amendment in front of us is reckless, irresponsible and full of empty promises, a bit similar to the budget that was put to the nation by their previous Tory leader. It's a budget which will lead to what is happening in Bolton. The Conservative group like to shout about how Bolton and how residents in Bolton pay less council tax than in Oldham because the Conservatives are in charge there. Are the Conservative group aware that Bolton will be stopping street cleaning this year? Is this the Conservative utopia that they wish to see in Oldham, one where the streets remain full of litter? It's worth pointing out that whilst the Conservative group in Bolton are putting up council tax by 3.99% this year, the same as us, they're doing so whilst cutting key services that residents care about. I know which sort of town I'd rather live in, Madam Mayor, and I know which administration I would rather be in. That's the Labour administration, which is responsible and caring. Madam Mayor, I urge the Council to reject the reckless and irresponsible Tory budget in front of us tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Actor. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last year, I gave the Conservative group quite a lot of stick regarding the budget amendment and for it being a copy and paste of the Liberal Democrats. I also gave them some stick because it contained nothing that featured in their election material. In only the second proposal since I've been a councillor, this year they had the chance to impress, and perhaps our group could have taken some suggestions and perhaps the administration could have. The Tory version of Ant and Dec submitted proposals to the Policy Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and to be honest, if I was voting for them, they'd be going right out the jungle and doing a load of challenges on the way. So let's pick some out, shall we? If Oldham had voted the Conservatives in May, Oldham would have seen a council tax freeze, but at what cost? Removal of all ward councillor budgets. That is, all the things where councillors make the biggest difference, where we can help directly fund the priorities of our residents, which are not banners attached to street lighting columns of about £12,000, just saying. No support to elected members in each district, including the support on lift bids or anything like that. No elected member budgets, casework, advice or guidance as examples. Now, you've kicked Bambi here. Our district teams are the beating heart of our community and they're worth the weight in gold. I don't want to get rid of them, I want more of them. And I've heard you saying at that meeting
that yours don't do anything. Well, I'd say if that's true, which I very much doubt, that's a failure on you. It's a failure because it's your role to get that district team to deliver your priorities. That is clearly the case. You haven't got any. Who is going to do it in our part of the world if you get rid of our district team? I've not got Paul's skills as an ex-police officer in working with the police, residents and businesses to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour, a full-time post. Or Eve's skills in working with the community, who incidentally I nominated for Employee of the Year, and it wasn't hard to get her endorsements from the people she worked with, another full-time position. Or Jen, who puts her heart and soul into helping the team, residents and councillors get the very best outcome in everything she does as a case worker, another full-time post. I just don't know how you can look at your own district team's faces again. How can you look them in the eye? Removal of support, humanitarian programmes, including cost of living and the wider health-related work. Really? Removal of support programmes that develop such things as clean streets, along with other campaigns. Now listen, I may not agree with the hows, wheres and whens, but I 100% agree that clean streets are a priority. Not to remove, you must be living in cloud cuckoo land. Removal of support to key events such as Bonfire Night, Remembrance Sunday and Royal celebrations. And you even claim to be royalists, some of you. Remove support to residents' first programmes, reduction in support to local partnership meetings and problem-solving meetings, no support to the voluntary sector on community activity. I'm genuinely lost for words. You couldn't make it up. I shouldn't actually be giving you grief for it. I should be thanking you, because it's going in our focus.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy.
I know that some of you have got your heart in the right place, but I genuinely don't know how you can put this rubbish, and it does make me question not only your politics, but your humanity. And before I sit down and vote against this piece of paper, 10 seconds, and this is a belter.
Councillor Barnes, please.
It is with a heavy heart that I stand here tonight, because I am going to abstain on my own motion, because, and I'll tell you why, because I agree with what the Liberal Democrats have just said. The district teams play a vital part in our community. Nor do I agree with removing the budget for councillors to use. I've used part of mine, and I'm sure my colleagues here have done that. I work very closely with the district partnership teams. They do a useful service. So I'm not going to vote for something I don't agree with. I can't. It's not who I am. And it might make me unpopular with my party. I'm not bothered. Because it's about what's right for the people, not what's right for party. It's people first, party second. Now, I don't agree with everything in the Labour budget, because they're blaming the Conservative government for the past 12 years. But it's about time we put that myth to bed, Madam Mayor, because after all, this Labour administration has been in power for 12 years. Simply blaming the incumbent government is not going to wash. They froze council tax in their first few years because they accepted money from the coalition government. And they accepted money from a Conservative government during the biggest threat to our country since World War II, COVID-19. And let's not forget why this Labour administration has had less to spend from central government. It's time to nail once and for all the claim that the last Labour government did not leave our economy in a dire economic mess. After all, who can forget Liam Byrne leaving the infamous note saying, "Sorry, there's no money left." Blair and Brown followed the previous Conservative administration's budget for 2 years, but let them splending rip. It's a little bit rich for the Labour Party to blame the Conservatives for the economic mess of the last 12 years when their own manifesto in 2010 committed them to cutting expenditure to balance the books. And I might add that in 12 years, this Labour administration has failed to collect over £58 million in council tax. A collection rate of 93%, which was in the last financial year but one, simply isn't acceptable. More focus should be spent on collecting council tax. Top local authorities regularly collect 97 to 98% a year. And better public services could be delivered if this administration focused on improving its council tax collection rates. So it's time for the Labour Party to stop blaming everyone but themselves. It's they who have failed to deliver quality public services for the people of Oldham, and it's time for them to take full responsibility for the mess this town is. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Oldham Conservatives budget proposals are simply political messaging, in my view, rather than a responsible proposal that protects key services or seeks opportunities to develop the town. This year, they want to increase council tax by 2%, yet the National Tory government, within their financial settlement, makes assumptions of council tax increases of 5% for towns like Oldham. And therefore, many of the councils in Greater Manchester are increasing the council tax by 5%, and we are proposing 3.99%. In Oldham, recognising the hardship our residents are facing, balanced with the pressure on the council finances from the increased cost, drastically contributed by the government's mini-budget of September 2022, we are left with little choice other than to propose an increase of 3.99%. This is, of course, with reluctance, and even with that increase, we are having to make budget cuts and find money from the council reserves so that we can continue to clean the streets, empty the bins, provide support to schools and support adults and children in social care, and provide many more key essential services. Unlike Bolton, a Tory-controlled council, we are not prepared to stop our street cleaning programme. The increase of council tax of £47 a year for a Band A property is nothing that compares to the price hike that has been inflicted on our residents from the mismanagement of the economy by the National Tory Party. We are all suffering because of that incompetence, that mini-budget, and yet they take no responsibility and blame entirely on Putin, Brexit, and anything else that they can find. Prices of food have increased, energy bills have increased, the price of fuel have increased, and rents and mortgage costs have increased. We have seen real household disposable income has fallen to a new low since comparable records began in 1956-1957. People will also be paying more in taxes to pay for their mistakes through the freeze in the personal allowance and brought into the various tax brackets by the end of the freeze. Average 2-year fixed-rate mortgage is at a 14-year high. Rents in the private sector are becoming more unaffordable, and so many of our people are at risk of homelessness due to the cost of the living crisis. I won't be supporting the Conservative amendment, as supporting it will mean not having the senior staff to deliver our big capital projects. Getting rid of our district teams will remove our residents further from essential services, and less income will even mean more cuts to services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor A. Councillor Hamblett.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, I can't top my colleague, so yeah, you beat me on that one. But what I will do is just point out some of the technicalities in terms of the social care aspects. I think I will note under 3.5 of your opposition budget, of your proposals, that you did note the import to provide additional support to our most vulnerable in the borough. However, freezing the uplift in such funds, that won't help them. Schools in your ward, for example, won't see any support or, in fact, a reduction in free school meals, trips out and school transports for the most vulnerable would surely decrease. And those eligible for free school activities, particularly in your neighbouring ward, in particular like Castleshaw, would probably cease. So just have a right good think before you start putting these things forward, because that's what will happen. Castleshaw, gone. It's thought that also, I thought you were a governor now, so perhaps maybe you also want to have this chat to your school and wonder about maybe what support they'll actually lose if we don't increase this. And just thought about the fact that the support that our most vulnerable will or won't receive, particularly in the number of care homes that you do have in Upper Mill, those trips out, the extra support that they get, the staff that go in to see them, all that will be reduced if you don't actually increase some of this uplift to support them and help them with their costs as well. You've got two very large scale settings in Upper Mill, and they'll be suffering if we don't actually give them some additional support. So, as I say, I don't think you've given some thought into this. And I also would give you advice in terms of the fact that, and I know you've sat on a few transport appeals, but in terms of the fact that people who apply for bus passes, blue badges and local links and other trips out, this council won't be able to support them. Again, if your colleague said you're a great shadow cabinet member, but yet you in another light said you're not particularly bothered about being a shadow cabinet member, it's clearly showing because you're not doing your research. Even the 151 officer, in their own words, the proposal to not increase the level of council tax for general purposes is possible but not recommended approach. So need I say more if the 151 officer has said it's not recommended? I don't think this is a suitable or a practical approach in terms of budgets. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlet. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think this amendment is designed to confuse, because this year, as in previous years, the Conservatives have promised to freeze council tax, yet their budget proposal includes an increase of 2%. I hope that the Oldham Conservatives aren't trying to hoodwink the good people of this town into thinking that they'd freeze council tax on a technicality. I note that the mover and seconder were at pains to talk about the general element of council tax and not overly refer to the 2% for adult social care, which I agree is desperately needed and I agree is the right thing to do. But they've led the people of Oldham to believe that if they were in charge, their council tax bills wouldn't go up at all. And these things can't both be true. You can't raise any element of council tax and claim to be freezing council tax. So what I would ask is that you are honest with the people of Oldham and you make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Quigg.
How exciting all this is. It's like a love-in between the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party. I've never seen such consensus. It's you know, you should try opposition sometime. You might enjoy it. I've got to say that you keep saying the government's telling you to increase council tax. Well, if you read the Localism Act, Councillor Jabbar, you'd see that council tax is capped by central government. They don't tell you to increase council tax. They say it's capped. Now, if anyone wants to stretch their minds back far enough, this council in 2013 could have froze council tax. It didn't. Who made that decision? Councillor Jabbar. So why is it the case when it comes before this council that we want to freeze council tax? Oh, it's a terrible thing to not freeze council tax, but it's quite all right to keep people who are already struggling paying more. You're behaving like the sheriff of Nottingham. It's taking people's money and you're wasting it. Wasting it on spendles, wasting it on offices. £2.1 million you spent on phase one of them offices, on fixtures and fittings. By goodness, it must be the best fitted office in Oldham, because nobody's using it, given all the staff that work from home. And I must say, you talk about we can help. This leaflet costs money to print, and £600,000 has gone on effective market research. Why? Why has that money not gone into frontline services to actually go and help people? It's 600 grand down the drain on getting people to knock on doors. They come and knocked on my door. There was a kid at the door who had not a clue what they were asking me. And then when I asked difficult questions, they ran away. I mean, it was like knock and door, run away with them. But to get back to the premise of what our proposal is, it is to freeze council tax. And that's what people of this borough are asking for. They're asking for a freeze. And Councillor Chatterton, you talk about 42 pence a week. Well, aren't you very flippant about 42 pence a week? 42 pence to you might be nothing, but 42 pence to the people of this borough every week is a lot of money. And for people on Band D, their bill, when you include Mr Burnham's council tax rises, is going up to nearly £91. An increase. £608. It's gone up since you took control of this council. 38% council tax has gone up since this Labour administration took control. And what have we got for it? What have we got for it? The streets are dirtier. We've got more fly tipping than ever. Potholes galore. I mean, I found 100 in the space of 14 days. 14 days. And I've got the proof, Councillor Gloucester, because the council's got the record of it.
Madam Mayor,
so you might quite flippantly talk about it, but I won't. Sit down, Councillor Jabbar. We've heard enough from you tonight. Had enough.
I'm not having... You said at the beginning of the meeting that this meeting needs to be conducted in a proper manner. He's shouting behind me, and I'm finding that very unhelpful. We need to conduct this meeting, Madam Mayor, in a proper way. Could you ask...
Call opposition, Councillor Jabbar.
No.
Councillor Quigg, you can get your point across without...
Madam Mayor, how I conduct myself is my decision, OK?
No, you are actually bound by the Code of Conduct.
And
now,
what part of the Code of Conduct have I broken, Madam Mayor, tonight?
Well, if you let me finish, please.
Can you can I ask the borough solicitor then for a clarification?
Will you stop interrupting? I welcome passionate debate in this chamber. However, when you start carrying on like that and shouting, you're not making your point. What you're actually doing is irritating people, quite frankly.
Well, people have a right to be offended, Madam Mayor, because we live in a democracy, and I know that this administration is not quite used to democracy and the idea of debate, given it's always one-sided. But there you go. There you go. Back to the point, Madam Mayor, I will be supporting the council tax freeze because it's something that we've stood on previously and will stand on again. It's what the people of this borough deserve, given how much they are paying in council tax and how little they are getting back out of it. We cannot sit here and say difficult decisions can't be made. But what we can do is we can say we can alleviate some of those burdens. And some of those burdens come from council tax. It's the one thing that people get through the door every year. And I will say, given wherever Anne Ryans is tonight, you were the one who came up with the £200 million that the council's lost. What you failed to say is the government nearly gave you £2 billion in grants in total throughout COVID, through all these other things that you don't see in the council's budget and that the administration gloss over because it's inconvenient truth. It's an inconvenient truth. And what we've got to also note is the unwritten rule that the budget that the administration is proposing, our amendment, etc., is that the unwritten word is debt. Debt.
Plus time.
Madam Mayor, you interrupted, so can I have the time back as well, please?
All right. An extension has been moved. It's already been included in the time. You've had slightly extra time, and nobody's prepared to second the extension. Can you
It was, Madam Mayor. Well, it's not too late, because you've cut it off, Madam Mayor, yet again. Well, the Chief Executive might not look too happy,
can we go to the vote then for an extension, please? Can we go to the vote for an extension? Anybody approve? Sorry, you're out of time, Councillor Quigg. Can you sit down, please? Councillor McCarran. Councillor McCarran.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to say a few words about the scrutiny process, if I may. The budget process is always a complicated and often lengthy exercise, especially in the present financial climate, when the Council is faced with the ongoing challenge of responding to the cuts in public expenditure imposed by central government. The Policy and Overview and Scrutiny Committee were therefore grateful to receive very concise information from all members of the Cabinet that sought to limit the national extent of the damage to local services to an absolute minimum. The equality impact assessments were especially helpful and provided much needed clarification to committee members. It is also worth mentioning that the alternative budget submitted by the Liberal Democrats on the 7th of February attempted to work within the same challenging financial framework as outlined by the administration. Whilst not necessarily able to agree to the amendments put forward, the committee were able to ask the Cabinet to review the proposals. Madam Mayor, I hope you will not mind me pointing out that when the administration brought their budget proposals to Policy Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 26th of January, there was a notable absence from the Conservative group. In the circumstances, I would have thought that for one of the most important meetings of the year, the group would have endeavoured to send a substitute. Can I also add that I was disappointed to note that the Conservative group sent out a press release indicating that their budget proposals were referred to Cabinet. The committee took the trouble to consider the proposal as submitted and asked a series of very detailed questions of the Conservative spokesman and decided not to accept the proposals nor to commend them to Cabinet for their consideration. This point is confirmed at the bottom of page 651 in the Green Book. Perhaps, and Councillor Barnes has already helped me out in this respect, I should also point out that given the proceedings of the committee meeting on the 7th of February, it is not entirely clear whether the proposals had the full support of all members of the Conservative group. The Conservative member who was present on this occasion voted against the proposal to scrap the district teams outlined by the Conservative spokesman, as he did not agree entirely that the district teams should be completely abolished. Finally, Madam Mayor, I would like to just take this opportunity to thank Anne Ryans and Mark Stenton for the considerable help and support they've given to the Policy Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the last 2 years. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Islam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The proposal put forward by the Oldham Conservative budget adds no value to the lives and the real value to the lives and the communities of Oldham. In fact, the proposal talk about cutting away support to residents, getting rid of the district team, will mean our residents are further removed in raising matters of concern to the district officers, whether that be in relation to community issues, early help, or before a crisis unfolds. District teams are involved in assisting our residents in dealing with complex matters, signposting them to appropriate departments and agencies, and building resilience of community groups and support voluntary groups to apply for external funding. With our district team, we deliver services right in the neighbourhoods where people live. What the Conservative proposal will do is remove all that support mechanism from our communities. This is being proposed at a time when our residents need that support at the most, with the looming cost of living crisis which has been caused by the Tory government due to failure to keep a grip on the country's finance. The Council has stepped in and supported our residents from the damage that has caused by the Tory government through the cost of living crisis and many other life challenges through our district teams. And if we adopted the Conservative proposal budget, we would be completely cutting that support away from our residents, Madam Mayor. Furthermore, Madam Mayor, can the Conservative group explain how they expect to deliver the Council's capital programme, transformation programme and basic services by removing oversight and management at senior level? How they expect to be able to bid for future round-up levelling up funding or any other funding pots without key strategic leadership, which has the recent past led to Oldham receiving millions of pounds of extra income for its capital programme. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Islam. Is there any opposition members who haven't spoken already wish to do so? Because I've got another 4 Labour speakers. So if you're happy to go ahead with the 4. All right, okay, then Councillor Harrison, thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't catch that. I've been sitting here tonight just finding it absolutely staggering that the Conservatives can sit there and talk about caring for the community, being a caring group wanting the best for our community, and yet they're talking about taking away the support that the administration have provided during the cost of living crisis. So many of our families across the borough have been in absolutely dire need over the last months, really hit hard by the crisis that many of us are experiencing. And they want to take away that support. Where would those people be without that support? It's something that any caring council would do to give real practical resources, support and help when people are in dire need. Surely they've considered the impact that this would have on the demand for services going forward. It's so short-sighted because when things go wrong now, there's going to be an impact in the future that will have a further impact on demand on services and the consequential impact on the council's budgets in the future. So I just ask them to rethink that, to take away that support, the damage it would do, not just now to families who are struggling, but to things, to the council, to the council budgets, the need for services going forward. And I just wonder, Madam Mayor, if the Conservative Shadow Cabinet Member for Finance is just spectacularly out of touch with how hard the average Oldhamer has been hit by the cost of living crisis, in part inflicted on us by their government. And given his previous words to a local journalist that he doesn't actually do anything for his shadow cabinet allowance, maybe it's a mixture of both incompetence and a display of just how out of touch he is with the majority of people living in our borough. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Councillor Nasheem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Have the Conservative group considered the impact on governance if suddenly 15 plus directors and senior managers suddenly report directly to the Chief Executive? Are they not concerned about the impact that this would have on the Council's performance at a time when local government is already under immense pressure? Surely the Conservative group don't think that the Chief Executive should spend 100% of their time line managing other people. Surely the Chief Executive's time would be better spent forging key strategic relationships with partners and bringing in new resources and opportunities for the borough, possibly through partnerships with the private sector, which they talk about a lot. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nasheem. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I rise to oppose this amendment because I think it's reckless and uncaring. Reckless in the sense that they're ripping out a senior management level without any working arrangements to replace it. It's not been thought through. It could be a disaster for the running of this council, and it has consequences that a lot of members have already stated. Also, ripping out as well the whole tier of district working and community working, which I find is extraordinary because it's a policy in general of every party that we actually have district working and local working, but that's being stripped out. Uncaring, they're ripping out and taking away the actual support and the cost of living support that this council's provided. Now, why that's important is that a lot of people, particularly people that are in need, won't get any support from the very little support from the reduction in the council tax that they're proposing. A 2% reduction that they're proposing would mean people that are on reduced council tax would benefit £5.80 in a full year. That's all. Yet the people at the top, because we all know council tax regressive, the people on the top band of council tax would get £90. So immediately you're feeding rich people and really, really putting a burden on poor people who wouldn't get the help with the cost of living monies that this council has put there, that many people are using as a lifeline and keeping it as something that has been immense support to thousands and thousands of Oldhamers. We're as well constantly about high taxation of local authorities. Do they realise that their government has got the highest taxation of any government for the last 100 years? Are you aware of that? But is it trickling down to local authorities? No, none of it at all. Local authorities are getting, as we've all heard, in Oldham's case, £200 million less each year than we've subsequently got from 2010. And they talk about collection rates. £42 billion was not collected in tax last year by your government. £42 billion. Now, I appreciate that we all try to get as much council tax in as possible, and Councillor Jabbar works extremely hard trying to do that. And I think that we are reasonably successful in general, because Oldham's a very low base economy. Another repercussion of your proposals as well is that you'll reduce the council base, financial base, year in, year out. You don't just cut 2% now. That transacts into next year and the following year. So you're really having an impact on future years as well. I would ask the council to totally and utterly throw this amendment out. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Mushtaq.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't planning on speaking on this, but I guess I just feel the need. I just feel the need to justify why I was applauding a Liberal Democrat councillor, and why I think for the first time since being a councillor I moved extension for a Lib Dem councillor, because I think Councillor Murphy hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're talking. There's a lot of national politics being discussed here, and I think the council tax is being seen as a political football that will no doubt come out in political leaflets in the coming weeks. But ultimately, I think Councillor Murphy's point is that we are local ward councillors, and we, despite everything else that we're talking about, we have a role to play as local ward councillors. And that's the point Councillor Murphy was making, and that's why he was aghast at some of the things that the Conservative councillors have said tonight and in the past. And those comments include the comments about the district teams, the use of their own ward budgets, comments about property purchases using councillor allowances, that too in Saddleworth, which is phenomenal. It just goes to show how very disconnected they are from the very communities that they allegedly serve. Madam Mayor, I've made this offer before and I'll make it again. I'm more than happy to sit down with Conservative councillors, myself, Councillor Chauhan and Councillor Jenny Harrison, and talk to them about what we do in our ward, how we do that, how we use our ward budgets, how we work with the local residents, and how, for example, in parts of the ward you see a significant increase, visible increase in cleanliness, a reduction in fly tipping. So we have a role to play, and if we work effectively as local ward councillors, we can achieve real results in the ward. With regard to Councillor Quigg, I mean, passion is not the word I'd use there. I won't use a word because I might end up getting in trouble. But again, it's this fixation with council tax, and I wish we could see the same energy, because again, I think passion is the wrong word, with regard to the emergence of food banks in Oldham, which I think the first one came about in 2012, after 2 years after we acquired a Conservative Prime Minister. I wish that energy was present with regard to the multi-year waiting lists, which Councillor Chauhan knows all too well, NHS cancer treatment waiting lists, and just general appointments, the queues of ambulances outside the Royal Oldham Hospital, which I've seen, the queues of trolleys, patients waiting in the corridors. I wish that energy was displayed there. The food and fuel poverty crisis, which, let's not forget, Madam Mayor, existed before COVID and before the war in Ukraine. The decimation of the very foundations of our society in places like Oldham made the impact of COVID, of the war in Ukraine and the current fuel and food crisis worse. Places like Oldham are hit much harder because the Conservative government decimated the very foundations of our societies. I wish Councillor Quigg could display the same energy and passion, but that would mean admitting that his government is responsible for what we are facing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mustard. Councillor Chris Gloucester.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Similarly, I wasn't going to speak, but there's something been said that I feel I need to address, and that was in relation to Robin Hood. So we all know that Robin Hood and his merry men used to rob the rich and give to the poor. But Councillor Woodvine and his merry men and women, so that you don't feel excluded. Apart from Councillor Barnes that's abstained, who wants to use the cost of living budget to fund this, are actually robbing the poor to give to others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gloucester. Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply?
Yes, I do, Madam Mayor, I do. Thank you very much for that. You know, my colleagues and colleagues from the Lib Dems have actually trashed the proposition by Conservatives. I just want to say, Madam Mayor, the central issue here is not increasing the council tax. Now, the mover and the seconder, Madam Mayor, have been economical with the truth. I was going to use another word, but mindful of what you said at the beginning, and to behave in a responsible way, I'm using the words economical with the truth. Because they're saying they're going to increase council tax by 2%, but not increasing the general element. But the fact of the matter is they're still increasing the council tax. Now, in his speech, Councillor Woodbine, at least on 4 occasions, said freezing the council tax. That is plainly wrong, Madam Mayor, and I hope when he speaks he corrects that, because this is sending a wrong message to the people of Oldham at a very difficult time. Now, well, I was going to, I'm just being mindful of what Madam Mayor said. I think economical with truth is the thing I'm saying, Madam Mayor. The other point I wanted to make is very clear, that Councillor Quigg talks about Localism Act. That's going back 10 years, Madam Mayor. I know what Localism Act is. He needs to read what the autumn statement, in the Chancellor, what the autumn statement said. In there, the Chancellor lifted the referendum limit for the general element of the council tax from 1.99 to 2.99. And he increased the adult social care precept from 1% to 2%, which they're using. So they're actually doing one element of the proposal. They're actually using what the Chancellor have said in the statement. Now, Madam Mayor, the Chancellor, recognizing the financial pressure the local authorities are in, decided to make that point and make that change. So it enables Council to raise funding to continue providing key services. Now, they're accepting one part and they're not accepting the other part. They're trying to fool the people of Oldham. That is plainly wrong. They don't get the local government finance at all. If they did, they would have made a better proposition here this evening. The second point I wanted to make, in relation to council tax collection, look, I agree entirely, Councillor Barnes, that we need to collect more council tax. And you sit on a overview scrutiny committee. You might want to, at some stage, ask for a presentation on that and see how we can all put our minds together to collect council tax better. But here's the reality. Reality is in GM, we're about middle in terms of collecting council tax. You know, that's the reason why we're in there, is because of the deprivation we have and so on. It's not an excuse. I am constantly looking at how we can increase our council tax. and we're bringing in new technology as well as seeking help from external enforcement agents to increase our council tax. But the link between collection rate and deprivation is clear. And I urge you, in your role as a member of the ONS committee, please ask us to come along. And what's the third interesting point, Madam Mayor, is that how would the people of Oldham accept their proposal when they can't get it agreed in their own group? The Tory group is divided. Councillor Barnes agreed here today that he doesn't accept that. He'll be sitting on his hands. And they're bringing and shouting about this as some kind of panacea, silver budget to resolve people cost of living. By the way, their government created. It's just nonsense. I don't know how these people can look in their mirror and be serious about the proposal they brought here tonight. It's absolutely rubbish. Madam Mayor, the issue we've got is a difficult one. Nobody denies that. I don't want to increase the council. The first thing Councillor Chatterton said when she became the leader of the council is to freeze council tax because she understood the challenge people were facing. But we couldn't do that because the government didn't give us the money to provide the key services. If they did, we'd do it now. In previous year, Madam Mayor, in 2012-13, the government asked us not to increase the council tax. We didn't. We got a grant from central government to compensate for it. And it's really easy for me here, going out to an all-out election, to say, okay, let's put Labour interest first and freeze council tax and put our best foot forward. But we didn't do that. We're responsible. We have to understand current financial needs of the council and the future needs. We can't be irresponsible. I'd love to freeze council tax, but can't because the government hasn't given us enough money. That's the reality. And it's not just Oldham, Madam Mayor. Our, as I said in my speech, is the joint lowest in GM. Other people are using, they're increasing council tax by 4.99. The full 4%, 9.99%, the Chancellor, in his autumn statement, allowed us to do. So this here, Madam Mayor, this proposal, honestly, has been absolutely rubbished by colleagues on this side and this side. And therefore, I'm completely against it. And I hope when the mover speaks, he clarifies this point, not to be economical with the truth. They're actually, in their proposal, proposing to increase council tax by 2%. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jabbar. Does Councillor Woodbine wish to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Am I ant or deck? It seems Councillor Jabbar is still very mistaken or is seeking to mislead us. It's sad that one of the most senior politicians in Oldham fails to understand basic economics. But that is unfortunately what the people of our borough have come to expect of this Labour administration. He says we've been economical with the truth, but at least we've been economical. For the avoidance of any doubt, Madam Mayor, freezing council tax is not impossible. We are proposing to do exactly that. And our plans have been worked on with the Assistant Director of Finance and considered deliverable by the Director herself. Indeed, there are some local authorities that are freezing tax. It is possible, and there is an alternative route. But Labour are refusing to take it. This is the first time this council has been forced to take a long, hard look at itself, and it hasn't come a moment too soon. Obviously, none of the Labour group have read our budget and are, as always, misinformed. The same could be said for the Liberal Democrats, and I'm struggling to differentiate. I'm struggling to see where the Liberal Democrat group stops and the Labour group starts. Is Councillor Chatterton writing your speeches too? The Labour group want to talk about Greater Manchester, so let's talk about Greater Manchester. Oldham currently, and I suppose this is a win for you lot, has the second highest rate of council tax in Greater Manchester. It's no longer the first, so well done for that. That's shameful. And the reason for this, and the reason why Oldham is in such a mess, Madam Mayor, is because of the improper management of this council's finances by the Labour administration for over a decade. If you're wondering, the first highest is Lib Dem-controlled Stockport, and that shows they are as bad as each other. Oh, it's Labour. Oh, well, there you go. It was Lib Dem. I think they are Lib Dem. Well, that's it. They're all the same to me, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to clarify one point which stuck out to me.
Can I have a point of order, please?
No. Oh, sorry, not the Mayor.
State your point of order, please.
Yeah, the Conservatives have said this many, many times, and I don't see any factual evidence of it. They keep going on about that the Liberal Democrats and Labour are somehow both sides of the same coin, where I don't see any evidence of it. We hold the account, the administration to the account,
It isn't a
but they
point
can't
of
back up
order.
what they're saying.
Personal explanation.
It's
Thank
not a
you.
point of order. You might like to read the Constitution while you're reading our budget.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, the one
Just carry
final
on.
point is Castleshaw. Castleshaw's been there for thousands of years, and it seems one particular member knows very little about Saddleworth. So if he'd like to come to Saddleworth sometime and speak to our hard-working Conservative colleagues there, he's very welcome to. I was going to say, I don't know where he's pulled that from, but I do know, Madam Mayor, but if I say it, I'll be breaking the code of conduct, so I'll refrain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodbine. We now go to recorded vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As before, please indicate for, against or abstain. Councillor Ahmed, Councillor Akhtar, Councillor Al-Hamdani,
Against.
Councillor Ali, Councillor Alias, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Azad, Councillor Ball, Councillor Barnes,
Abstain.
Councillor Bashforth Marie,
Against.
Councillor Birch, Councillor Brownridge, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Chatterton,
Against.
Councillor Shawhan, Councillor Dean, Councillor Gloucester Chris, Councillor Gloucester Hazel,
Against.
Councillor Goodwin, Councillor Hamblett, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Hindle,
Against.
Councillor Hume, Councillor Hussain Aftab, Councillor Hussain Feeder, Councillor Hussain Sajid, Councillor Ibrahim, Councillor Islam, Councillor Iqbal, Councillor Jabbar,
Against.
Councillor Kenyon, Councillor Lancaster, Councillor Marland, Councillor McLaren, Councillor McManus, Councillor Moores, Councillor Monroe,
Against.
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Mushtaq, Councillor Nasheen, Councillor Fithian Clint, Councillor Fithian Kyle, Councillor Quigg, Councillor Ria,
Against.
Councillor Roberts, Councillor Salamat, Councillor Sharp,
4.
Councillor Sheldon, Councillor Shuttleworth,
Against.
Councillor Surgeon, Councillor Sykes, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Williams,
Against.
Councillor Williamson, Councillor Woodvine,
4.
Councillor Gary.
So for Amendment 2, there was 8 for, 45 against and 3 abstentions. So I declare the amendment lost. Council will now debate the original motion. Does any member wish to speak on the original motion? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As we've already discussed this evening, every year it's harder and harder to balance the Council's budget, and this year we've had to make some very difficult choices. In neighbourhoods, we looked at everything we do and to find ways of doing things differently and more efficiently while providing the best services that we can. And I'd like to look in more detail at some of the proposals we've put forward. The Council's electricity costs aren't capped, so we need to look at ways of managing the £2 million street lighting bill, incidentally not a statutory service, and safeguarding against increases in costs. The budget proposals to trim and dim street lighting will save up to £800,000. We're learning from the experience of councils like Rochdale and switching on 10 minutes later while turning off 10 minutes earlier, as well as dimming lights. This level of lighting will still be safe, as well as saving money and benefiting the environment. Reducing councils' local budgets by £1,000 a year rather than scrapping them all together is suggested reluctantly, but is a fair measure given some of the other choices we face. Councillors spend this money in their communities, supporting local events like the Jubilee and Christmas lights, as well as local groups and sports clubs. Families benefit from free holiday play activities, and all our neighbourhoods have planting and small-scale environmental improvements. And I would also like to reassure everyone that Oldham will continue to celebrate Bonfire Night, but in a more environmentally friendly way in the town centre. This will help to boost local businesses, as well as offering a safe and exciting way of remembering the 5th of November. And I'm pleased to be able to confirm that we've also been able to propose a free pest control service. This is in response to increased reports of vermin, partly caused by the littering we all experienced during the pandemic, which are very distressing for the people affected, as well as a potential public health hazard. We can't let this get worse because people can't afford to pay for help. Labour is investing £100,000 and expanding Oldham's pest control team. We will recruit additional staff and materials to pay for public health-related pest control services for vulnerable residents. The proposal is that there will be no charge for homeowners or tenants for pest control services at domestic properties. However, landlords owning multiple properties will be charged. And I'd also like to clarify something about Don't Trash Oldham, which will be moving into a new phase from September. And we will be using some of the resources previously invested to invest into enforcement action, particularly against fly tipping across the borough. Being truthful and open are two of the principles of public life. Some of the contributions this evening have been less than candid. I would like to think this is because of ignorance and misunderstanding rather than a deliberate attempt to mislead. Local government finance is complicated and effort is needed to understand how the budget works. But the difference between revenue, day-to-day spending, and capital, large-scale long-term investment, is not hard to grasp. Nonetheless, people who throw around accusations of lying should take rather more care to tell the truth themselves. Finally, Madam Mayor, 12 lost years of Tory-led government have brought us to this point. Our public services are at or beyond breaking point. I'm proud to be part of a Labour administration that is investing in building a better Oldham and helping those least able to cope with the Tory cost of living crisis as outlined in these budget proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's very telling that in all of these proposals we've had amendments from the Liberal Democrats, we've had amendments from the Conservatives, we've not had an amendment from the Independents, and we've got the original budget proposals, that everyone's actually somewhere in the same vicinity. You know, whether you're arguing about sort of a slight reduction in what people are paying or it's slightly more. But the problem is, this is all working on the basis that the system works. And it is not. This is a broken system. We're basing this budget on the principle that the government says that we have to fund things through council tax, that we have to have a balanced budget, that it is a legal requirement of this council to set a balanced budget. So if we don't vote through an agreed budget, we're breaking the law. But if the principle on which we're putting together that budget is wrong, then surely we have to stand up and shout from the rooftops that that principle is wrong. And my colleague Chris Gloucester said that we agree in principle with where we are and where this budget is, that a 1.99% increase in council tax and the increase in social care is the right thing to do. But that is coming from the wrong place. The way that we fund social care in this country is wrong. 57% of every pound raised in council tax goes on social care. It's not going on fixing our roads. It's not going on local priorities. It's going on social care. That's the wrong way to fund it. And the government said time and time again it was going to do something about this, and time again it failed. It even made a promise of making a health and social care levy and then withdrew it and said instead, you have the right to instead increase the social care precept in your area by 2%. And in Oldham, that means in one of the most deprived areas of the country, they've given us the freedom to impose an extra 2% levy on the poorest people in the country to help the poorest people in that borough. That's not fair. And whether you are red in tooth and claw, or gold in heart and mind, or blue, then it's still not fair, and we want fairness. Every one of those people wants fairness. This system is not fair, and I'll give you an example of why it's not fair. Council tax. I hear time and again that Westminster sets this wonderfully low council tax. Well, that's amazing. None of us came up with a way we could do that in Oldham, and I'll tell you why. Band H council houses. How many do you think there are in Oldham? I think that possibly the financial officer might know. There's 80. There's 80 in Oldham. Do you know how many there are in Westminster? 16,400. You're basing the system on something that is so unequal. It just doesn't make any sense. And no one's fixed it. No one's run a council tax valuation since 1991. That wasn't the Labour government that did it. The coalition government didn't do it. And the Conservative government didn't do it. Because they're all scared of making hard decisions, and this is a hard decision, that we should not be funding the budget the way that we are. We should be funding the budget through properly funding local government. And that means changing that system.
Madam
and whilst
Mayor,
your budget might be okay in the way that we are...
Can I raise a point of explanation, please?
No.
Why?
It can raise a point of order.
Well, there's a point of information then. Well, I have read it, and the point of explanation are in there. The Burst list is saying I can. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to add that the coalition government didn't review it either.
I know, I literally said that.
Excuse me, Councillor Woodbine.
Well, speak a bit clearer then, Councillor Alamdani, please.
You're
I can't hear him, so you should speak clearer. Well, good for you, I didn't. Well, I am listening, but he can't...
Okay,
oh, well, so my hearing
if I may
issues are serious,
continue,
are they?
there are 207 local authorities put together that don't have as many Band H houses as Westminster do. That is unfair. That is unfair on the people of Oldham. It is unfair on the people of Burnley, on the people of Bury, on the people of everywhere that doesn't have that fundraising power and has to pay out more in social care. And I don't care who runs this local authority, whether it's Liberal Democrat, Conservative or Labour, we are all screwed until that system changes. And that's why this budget is wrong. Not because of the details of it, and I might disagree with some of them, from definitely what you said and definitely what you said. But I'll tell you what, if the system is that badly screwed, we're all done for.
Councillor Ndami, you've got an extra 30 minutes because of the, seconds because of the interruption. Thank you. Councillor Mushtaq.
Man, why did you have to put me after Sam? Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the paper highlights efficiencies, or more accurately cuts, to of over £1 million for the corporate services portfolio. Despite these enforced cuts, this Conservative government, the leader, has stressed to me the importance of a council that is resident-focused and puts the residents first. She has stressed the importance of building on a culture in which we are caring, compassionate and receptive to the needs of our residents, and that we adopt a solutions-based approach. This is exactly what I'm doing with the hard-working, dedicated officers I work with, all of whom display the same passion to provide the best possible service for our residents. An important point here is that most of our workforce are our residents. The government talks a good game, as no doubt our local Conservative councillors will, but the reality, as highlighted in the papers, is very different. Cutting local council budgets will only make it more difficult for councils to deliver the services their residents need. We've seen this with Northamptonshire, Croydon and Slough, to name a few, with many more at panic stations. It is testament to this administration that the budget continues to be delivered and the work continues to be progressed despite the ongoing attacks by this Tory government. Had it not been for a Labour administration, the ambitions of the leader and the Labour group, this council too might have gone into administration a long time ago. That's not a political point, Madam Mayor. It's a very serious point. There are those that have thrown in the towel after almost 13 years of cuts to local councils. It genuinely is disheartening when you're doing everything you can to do the best for your residents, but the Conservative government year on year tells you that your ambitions for your residents is not their priority. Their priority is cutting our budgets and erecting barriers for this hard-working, ambitious Labour Council to do the best by our residents. Madam Mayor, the Conservative councillors may stand and reel off a list of government grants, conveniently forgetting to mention the billions taken from local councils. But by doing that, by highlighting the scraps given and forgetting the billions taken, our local Conservative councillors are effectively telling us to stop highlighting the truth, stop speaking up for our residents and get on with it. Madam Mayor, it's akin to taking away your home, giving you a small tent and saying, look how wonderful we are, we've given you a new tent. Madam Mayor, that might work in their own echo chamber, but it won't be forgotten out there in places like St James, Royton North, Royton South and the Chadderton wards when people go to the ballot box. Maybe then the echo chamber will come crashing down. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mushtaq. Councillor Quigg.
Wunderbar, Madam Mayor. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIPFA for short, has moved Oldham Council to high risk on the financial stress code compared to its nearest neighbour due to an over-reliance on reserves for the revenue budget. A healthy sign that things aren't about to go wrong, I suppose. But then again, if we look at the borrowing of the administration, 59.4 million. And that's going to go up even more. 14.7 million on IT. IT, the great schemes of this council that's already had an HR system that's a disaster. What did they do? Spend a couple more million replacing it. I mean, if you're going to waste money, this is the Labour Council, by the way, going to waste money, giving it to IT companies is probably a gift and golden cheque. Just give them a blank cheque and say, write your own. It's crazy, Madam Mayor, absolutely crazy. And I will say this, council tax has been mentioned throughout the night, thanks to the Conservative group. But in Bolton, they charge £168 less than Oldham. Why? Because this Labour Council, year after year, has increased council tax and it is punishing people. And we've heard from Councillor Alandani about the rates having been revalued since 1991. So I take it the Liberal Democrats are in favour of revaluation and punishing the people of this borough even more. Because if you're going to do that, Sam, if you're going to start revaluing people's homes, you're going to end up with a lot of people who can't afford to pay. And there's a reason why they don't revalue the rates, and that's one of them. That's one of them. It's absolutely fiscally irresponsible to do that because it will punish people the most. And I will say to the administration's budget about dimming lights and saving money, it is, however, a risk where people could become unsafe, a risk of higher crime, and a risk to the public overall. And that is something that the police will end up having to pick up because of the crime, because it will increase crime levels. It's the whole point of having public lighting. And it is something that this administration should think about carefully. But of course, it's about the green agenda. And the green agenda, I must say, I've had a good read of the administration's budget and all the other paraphernalia that goes with it. But according to that, £5.6 billion waits under the hills of Oldham in all these green investments. Well, I tell you what, if you're going to make figures up, £5.6 billion in these green investments, I don't know where you're going to get them from, because unless you're going to start fracking, you're not going to get anywhere near that. That's just making things up. There's no way there's £5.6 billion worth of investments. It just isn't there. The technology is expensive. So where are you going to get it from? You're admitting your own budget, the private sector aren't going to invest in Oldham. So where are you going to get this money from? You make it unpopular for it to come here, and then you're saying they're going to invest. It doesn't make any sense, Madam Mayor. It does not make any sense. The big thing, though, that Councillor Roberts mentioned was the fact that they've had to look at Don't Trash Oldham. Don't Trash Oldham is basically clearing up the mess that's been prolonged for years. We've got one gully cleaner, essentially, that's managing the whole of the borough. And that is not going to work going forward, because if that breaks down, Where we're going to get another one from, we're going to end up with no street cleaning, no gully cleaning, no nothing. And I've got to say, the budget from the administration is just the same old Rizzler paper that's been produced year after year. We hear Councillor Jabbar going on and on and on and on. He's been saying the same speech for year after year, and there's nothing new in it. And this administration wastes money on spindles, it wastes money on the town centre, it wastes money on projects that the public aren't crying out for. And I've got to say, we can do better, and Madam Mayor, I will be voting against this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Quigg. Councillor Brownridge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I fear I was not going to speak on this, echoing a small theme, but listening to Sam's very impassioned speech, I felt I had to say how desperately I agree with him as the portfolio holder for social care. The system is completely shattered. It's not just broken, it's trashed completely. And Mr Johnson stood up and said he had a solution, yet another one of his lies. So again, the burden's been put on council taxpayers. We have a situation where we are the biggest spender out of the council budget. We have rising demand. We're already predicting a huge shortfall again. That demand's going up because people are living longer, but they're living in poorer health. So their needs are greater intervention, which obviously costs more money. And that's going to go on getting worse because those health problems are exacerbated by poverty and by the cost of living crisis that we're all living through. So we are in a parlous state where we have to do something. Now, I agree with Sam that the whole system needs rebranding, but as that's not going to happen in the short term, we have to do the best we can within the confines within which we're working, which means, like it or not, we have to reduce our expenditure on social care despite the fact that demand's rising. Now, we can only do that by changing completely how we do it, and we've introduced, as part of our budget proposals, the new target operating model, which talks about early intervention. So the intention is to help people sooner in the process, to prevent them getting into crisis where their demands are higher and more expensive. To do that, we need a really effective district working. This is predicated on the basis of care being given as a combined offer between the community, the residents themselves, the families, voluntary organisations, the National Health Service, and we're talking about social prescribing as an element of that. So really strong district working. I don't think the Tory party actually understands what district working does. It's not just about casework, it's far more than that. And it's about genuine partnership working at district level, delivering a different offer to different parts of the borough, reflecting the actual need that's been identified. If we destroy district working, not only can we not deliver the changes and improvements we need to make to social care to deliver those savings, but we'll actually put increased demand. We will end up only being able to deliver statutory services, and those at a much lower level than we already achieve. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brownridge. After taking some advice, Councillor Woodvine, I understand that you are entitled to a point of personal explanation. Would you like to?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's all right.
Nobody else has indicated to speak, so Councillor Jabbar, do you wish to reply?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. But before I go on to the point that's been made by various colleagues, can I echo what the leader said at the beginning of her speech, Madam Mayor? My sincere thanks to Harry Cattrall, Chief Executive, Deputy Chief Executive, Syed Osman, Executive Director, Emma Barton, Assistant Chief Executive, Shelley Kipling, and of course Anne Rhines and her team for the hard work they put in for us to have a balanced budget. It's been really hard, Madam Mayor, and it wouldn't have been possible without their help and support. I also like to record my appreciation to the leader for the strategic direction she's given throughout the budget setting process, Madam Mayor. Look, in terms of dealing with some of the issues, Madam Mayor, Councillor Al-Hamdani is correct. The whole local government finance system is broken. So he talks about the council tax base in Westminster. He didn't mention the business rate base. I can tell you this now. They raise similar amount of money from car parking charges than we do here in Oldham from business rates. And how can that be right, Madam Mayor? And that's the basis on which government sends it sets its formula for giving monies to council for essential services. The adult social care we've been talking about for a long time. God knows how many white papers we've had, but nothing actually delivered. So that's the reason why we're in this position, not because of wasteful management by Labour here, Councillor Quigg and Councillor Woodbine. Let me give you statistics. Over the last few years, we have brought in £57.83 million from government because government have been impressed with what we're doing here. They've scrutinized our policy, they've scrutinized our projects, and they believe what we're doing is correct. And that's why they've given us £57.83 million. Now, if we were wasteful, how would it be possible your Tory government gives us this money? In relation to the reserves, Councillor Quigg, if you look at the accounts paper, and you seem to have a very selective way of dealing with local government finance. It's in the papers. It shows you that by end of this financial year, council would have £78.3 million of reserves. Now, at a time like this, Madam Mayor, it's not a bad reserve level to have. It's not like Northamptonshire, where the government had to send in, Tory Northamptonshire, when the government had to send in inspectors to manage the council finances. We're not in that position. We'll never be in that position. That's why we had to put up the council tax. And you have really selective memories. You talk about the green agenda as though it doesn't matter. It's some kind of optional thing people do who like hugging trees. It's a reality. Look around what's happening in the world. And this £5.6 billion is required to bring carbon neutrality in Oldham. And the money will be coming from private sector. Our chief executive is leading that mission in Greater Manchester. And in Oldham, we are the lead authority, sorry, in GM, we're the lead authority. And people are queuing up to come to Oldham. It's an absolute fact. You might laugh. You might laugh. This is absolute fact. There are more than one serious player who wants to come into Oldham to deliver. I'm telling you, if you don't believe me, then you need to sit with me. Don't laugh and interrupt in this meeting. This is an extremely serious matter. I am saying this publicly, Madam Mayor. This is an absolute fact. There are people queuing up to come here to help us to deliver carbon neutrality in Oldham. And these are big players, international, national players. And I wouldn't take this kind of comment from Councillor Quigg. In relation to street lighting, look, it is a serious thing, and we won't be doing it if it actually brings any kind of harm to pedestrians or residents. But it gives us an opportunity to reduce the lighting levels so we can make big savings, but also save carbon emission. We're doing everything we can. I hope that demonstrates. We're looking at every possible avenue to make savings and to deliver the best for Oldham. Madam Mayor, I think the reality of this is this, that if we had enough money, we wouldn't be increasing council tax. That's the reality. But we're doing everything we can. We've looked at every single area, and everybody's worked really hard. So because of that, we looked at the reserve, we looked at the cuts that we're making in the council services, and then we looked at increasing the council tax. So balance of all those things has given us a position which, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, it's the right for Oldham, and hopefully it will also deliver the ambition, the great ambition that we have to transform the borough and make life better for everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Jabbar. Do Council agree the recommendations in the report, and it is a recorded vote?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Once again, please indicate. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Al-Hamdani.
Against.
Councillor Ali. Councillor Alias. Councillor Arnott. Councillor Azad. Councillor Ball. Councillor Barnes.
Against.
Councillor Bashforth. Marie.
For.
Councillor Birch.
For.
Councillor Brownridge. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chatterton.
For.
Councillor Shawhan. Councillor Dean. Councillor Gloucester Chris. Councillor Gloucester Hazel.
Against.
Councillor Goodwin. Councillor Hamblett.
Against.
Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hindle.
Against.
Councillor Hume. Councillor Hussain Aftab. Councillor Hussain Feeder. Councillor Hussain Sajid. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Islam. Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Jabbar.
For.
Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Lancaster. Councillor Marland. Councillor McLaren. Councillor McManus. Councillor Moores. Councillor Munro.
For.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Mushtaq. Councillor Nasheem. Councillor Fithian Clint. Councillor Fithian Kyle. Councillor Quigg. Councillor Ria.
Against.
Councillor Roberts. Councillor Salamat. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sheldon. Councillor Shuttleworth.
For.
Councillor Surgeon. Councillor Sykes. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Williamson. Councillor Woodvine.
Against.
Councillor Gary.
For.
So we've got 36 for and 22 against. So I declare that the motion's carried. Council must now vote on the resolutions detailed within the summons. Does Council note the agreed council tax base for the year 2023 to 24 as agreed on the 23rd of January 2023? And does the Council approve the council tax requirement for the Council's own purposes for 2023-24 as detailed within the summons? Does any member wish to speak? No.
Once again, Madam Mayor, a recorded vote. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Al-Hamdani. Councillor Ali. Councillor Alias. Councillor Arnott. Councillor Azad. Councillor Ball. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Bashforth Marie.
For.
Councillor Birch. Councillor Brownridge. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chaddison.
For.
Councillor Shawhan. Councillor Dean. Councillor Gloucester Chris. Councillor Gloucester Hazel. Councillor Goodwin. Councillor Hamblett.
For.
Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hindle.
For.
Councillor Hume. Councillor Hussain Aftab. Councillor Hussain Feeder. Councillor Hussain Sajid. Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Islam. Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Jabbar.
For.
Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Lancaster. Councillor McLaren. Councillor McManus. Councillor Moores. Councillor Munro.
For.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Mushtaq. Councillor Nasheem. Councillor Fithian Clint. Councillor Fithian Kyle. Councillor Quigg. Councillor Ria. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Salamat. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sheldon. Councillor Shuttleworth.
For.
Councillor Surgeon. Councillor Sykes. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Williamson. Councillor Woodvine. Councillor Gary.
That's been agreed. Thank you. Does the Council agree that the amounts as detailed within the summons calculated for the year 2023-24 in accordance with section 31A to 36 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992? Does any member wish to speak? No. It's another recorded vote.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Al-Hamdani.
For.
Councillor Ali. Councillor Alias. Councillor Arnott. Councillor Azad. Councillor Ball. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Bashforth Marie.
For.
Councillor Birch. Councillor Brownridge. Councillor Byrne. Councillor Chatterton.
For.
Councillor Shawhan. Councillor Dean. Councillor Gloucester Chris. Councillor Gloucester Hazel. Councillor Goodwin. Councillor Hamblett.
For.
Councillor Harrison. Councillor Hindle. Councillor Hume. Councillor Hussain Aftab. Councillor Hussain Feeder. Councillor Hussain Sajid. Councillor Abreem. Councillor Islam. Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Jabbar.
For.
Councillor Kenyon. Councillor Lancaster. Councillor McLaren. Councillor McManus. Councillor Moores. Councillor McEnroe.
For.
Councillor Murphy. Councillor Mushtaq. Councillor Nasheen. Councillor Fithian Clint. Councillor Fithian Kyle. Councillor Quigg. Councillor Rhea. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Salamat. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Sheldon. Councillor Shuttleworth.
For.
Councillor Surgeon. Councillor Sykes. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Williams.
For.
Councillor Williamson. Councillor Woodvine.
For.
Councillor Gary.
That's carried. Thank you. Does Council note that for the year 2023-24, the Mayoral Police and Crime Commissioner precept and the Mayoral General precept, including fire service, for Greater Manchester has been issued to the Council as detailed in the summons. Does any member wish to comment? Councillor Sykes.
Seeing I thought you were going home early. Very briefly, I couldn't let this pass because we're supposed to be ever so grateful that the King of the North has frozen his discretionary mayoral budget, and full credit to him for doing that. However, there is some eye-watering amounts of money slushing around in other things that are his responsibility. I will touch briefly on the massive amount of money we've wasted, and we still haven't got a decision on the clean air zone as he faces off against the Tory government that say we have to have a charge, and he's been on the road to conversion and now thinks we don't have to have a charge, but in the meantime we've blown 60 million, depending who you believe, or at least 3.5 on signs, and we've got a whole set of AP&R cameras all busy snapping away without any remit that are going to end up, I suspect, passported on to some other organisation without any debate that that's what we wanted in Greater Manchester. There are huge amount of money slushing around in transport and in transport for Greater Manchester, whether it's for saving bus services, the franchise system. It's built on a deficit of which there is a big hole coming down the track or down the bus lane if we don't plug it, because usage isn't back to where it should be or was to post-pandemic levels. And if it doesn't get back to that and beyond that, the whole system doesn't work. Metrolink usage is below what it needs to do to break even and wash its face, and that's a fully funded system. So we're in all sorts of trouble there about our existing services, never mind extending the network. But best of all, because you wouldn't know it from this resolution here, with a 6.5% increase in police, fire and the blue light services that are his responsibilities. 6.5%. That's considerably more than the government says we can do as a local authority or other local authorities can do. And that's 6.5% for what we can only describe as a poorly performing police force. So we're being asked to pay more with the promise of jam tomorrow that we'll end up with a decent police service. We actually need a decent police service now. And it's his failure and that of others that we haven't got one. The misreporting of crimes, the missing crimes that haven't been reported. And for that, we're now being asked, and all that we said earlier about some of those least able to pay are being asked to pay for it in Oldham to get the police service they deserve. And I think it's scandalous, but it just passes us by while we talk about everything else on the other side with very little scrutiny and very little comment. And that's why I thought, Madam Mayor, it's appropriate to comment it on here, because some of us have noticed. Thank you.
Any other comments, Councillor Chatterton?
I suppose just to respond to it slightly, because obviously, as leader of a GM authority, I attend quite a lot of meetings at the CA. So firstly, on patronage, you are right, it has to be a system that washes its face. The cap in bus fare takes us till September, which is the start of franchising. In terms of patronage, it's going up month on month. I think we're about at 80% of pre-pandemic levels now in terms of the buses. For our Metrolink, that is over. So we're above 80% now for our Metrolink. And it has increased month on month on month in the past 6 months. So they are confident, certainly with the buses, we'll be back to where it will be. And there was a significant increase once the £2 fare cap came in. Now, in terms of the police service, you are right, it's more than, I think, other areas, you are right in the terms of, it's more than the government said we could do, or recommended by the government, and we discussed this at the CA. We're at a lower base in Greater Manchester for what we fund to our police service than most of the city regions, and that's one of the reasons why. There is no justification, and we've discussed this at quite length, haven't we, over the past few years, about, if we're being honest, how appalling Greater Manchester Police have been in recent years. And I don't think anybody would dispute that, and it certainly wasn't disputed by anybody here when they went inadequate. I think, though, to give Greater Manchester Police their due, and I attended, and I think it was Sam attended as well, the Police Accountability Board, a couple of months ago. It was pre-Christmas, wasn't it, Sam? Time moves. They have moved on from inadequate and effectively now requires improvement. And Stephen Watson, as Chief of Greater Manchester Police, talked there about the numbers and the hundreds of staff they're recruiting into particularly call handling. They've gone down from your 999 calls, which were taking nearly a minute to answer, and now reduced to less than 10 seconds. And the rate on your 101 calls that's already increased significantly as well. So I think what Greater Manchester Police are asking for, and what this is for, is to build on that progress. We all want a better police service, don't we? And our residents demand a better police service. Now, I met with Stephen Watson this morning, as luck would have it, about some other matters with the other CA leaders. And he talks us through a plan that's going to be made public, and that he's going through with his staff at the moment about further changes to Greater Manchester Police, so they are more responsive. And what he wants to be, and what he's really keen on, and this will partially fund, is how they become more responsive at a neighbourhood level. He believes, and most of our residents do, that, you know, policing starts with your bobby on the street. You know, if you don't see one, you can't be one, and you don't believe in it, do you? So he's going through some changes at the moment that I think are due to go public once he's gone through his staff. So just thought I'd give a response back on that, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chadderton. Councillor Quigg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Sykes has probably covered quite a fair bit of what I was going to say, but I think it's not an agreement, Howard, don't worry. I don't think it's without remiss saying about the £60 million failure of CAS. CAS was a tax on motorists that Mr Burnham tried to bring in through the back door, and then proclaimed that it was all somebody else's fault, until the government said, pal, it's yours, you make the decision, you want it Greater Manchester. No. I've never known anyone try and sign off a £60 million scheme without any proper legal authority. I mean, that is a scandalous waste of money. It's taxpayers' money in Greater Manchester that's been wasting. But his next great scheme, you'll be relieved to hear, is a parking tax. So if you go to work and you have a parking spot, Mr Burnham wishes to tax it. And you could be paying £1,000 a year just to have a parking spot at work. Now, not everybody has an executive parking spot. I know it might be a novel concept at the Civic Centre, but most people go to work and park. And I think it's unfair that the Mayor is being rewarded with a council tax rise of 6.5% that's coming from taxpayers, and then he decides to go, well, we'll take a bit more through another levy, we'll take a bit more through CAS, and we don't know where we're doing with CAS, but we'll eventually say it's something to do with the green agenda. In terms of the franchising, another disaster that may well be waiting to happen, given the figures from TFGM, are that there's probably going to be a £260 million black hole in the franchising. Where's that going to come from? Council taxpayers. So there'll be another council tax rise coming from the Mayor. It isn't good enough to have a police service service now, it used to be a force, it's a service now, that failed and continues to fail. You can have nice glossy things saying we're now out of special measures, we're doing all this, we're making progress, but on the streets people don't feel that, people don't see that. And I think to ex-serving police officers like yourself, Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Gloucester, I think it must be highly frustrating to see how Greater Manchester's declined in terms of the service that it offers the public. And I think it should be noted that to have the Mayor coming here and asking us for more and more money each year, when other mayors, I might add, Conservative mayors, don't charge a precept. And this one, in Greater Manchester, constantly increases council tax and does. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Quigg. Is there any other comments? It's not a recorded vote, this one, but can you give a show of hands to say that?
Madam Mayor, can we move a recorded vote?
No, it's just for noting. Just for noting.
Yeah, but what a recorded vote.
Yeah. No. Just a show of hands. Thank you. Does Council agree to set the aggregate amounts as detailed within the summons as the amount of council tax for 2023-24 for each part of its area and for each of the categories of its dwellings? Does any member wish to speak? Agreed.
Okay, another recorded vote, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
This last one, Councillor Ahmed, Councillor Akhtar, Councillor Al-Hamdani, Councillor Ali, Councillor Alias, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Azad, Councillor Ball, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Bashforth Marie, Councillor Birch, Councillor Brownridge, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Chatterton, Councillor Shawhan, Councillor Dean, Councillor Gloucester Chris, Councillor Gloucester Hazel, Councillor Goodwin, Councillor Hamblett, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Hindle, Councillor Hume, Councillor Hussain Aftab, Councillor Hussain Feeder, Councillor Hussain Sajid, Councillor Ibrahim, Councillor Islam, Councillor Iqbal, Councillor Jabbar, Councillor Kenyon, Councillor Lancaster, Councillor McLaren, Councillor McManus, Councillor Moores, Councillor Monroe, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Mushtaq, Councillor Nasheen, Councillor Fithian Clint, Councillor Fithian Kyle, Councillor Quigg, Councillor Ria, Councillor Roberts, Councillor Salamat, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sheldon, Councillor Shuttleworth, Councillor Surgeon, Councillor Sykes, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Williams, Councillor Williamson, Councillor Woodvine, Councillor Gary.
Madam Mayor, apologies. I couldn't quite hear the Chief Exec, so I voted for. So apologies.
Yep. That's it. So thank you everyone. That actually concludes the business for this evening.